Chapter 1726. Killing the Demon Fetus. 2. He could not stand Zhou Fai's expression of having everything under control. Eye of the Demon Fetus. The Demon Fetus's eyes widened as a strange blue light flashed across them. However, in the next second, something shocking happened. Under his concept God ability, the Eye of the Demon Fetus, Zhou Fai actually had no reaction. It was as if he was completely immune to his concept God ability. How is that possible? The Demon Fetus cried out involuntarily. Under normal circumstances, under his Demon Fetus eye, any life form, regardless of gender, would immediately become pregnant as long as they met his gaze. Furthermore, it would be a Demon Fetus. The Demon Fetus would extract the energy essence of the original body in a short period of time. Then, it would borrow the energy essence of the original body to be born, forming a ruthless demon infant. The demon infant was born and the demon matriarch was dead. It was through this method that the demon fetus had accumulated a large number of demon infant fighters. It was precisely because of this strange and abnormal conceptual power that most of the illusionist clan was unwilling to make him their enemy. Some illusionist clan, especially the male illusionist clan, would rather die than lose face in front of the other illusionist clan and leave a bad history after all. The demon fetus was also famous among the illusionist clan for its strange conceptual god ability. However, he never expected this. The conceptual divine power that he relied on actually had no effect on the common people's regal. What was going on? What secrets did he have? Yet, when Zhou Fai heard the other party's voice, he realized that the other party had used some tricks on him. However, Zhou Fai could not help but smile when he sensed that his divine body and will were completely unharmed. The other party's strange methods were indeed impossible to guard against. However, his physique came from the supreme sacred body inherited from the eternal immortal realm. His supreme sacred body was invincible. Needless to say, they were on the same level. Even if an attack at the supreme will realm landed on him, it might not be able to kill him directly. At most, he would be severely injured. This grade 4 supreme god illusionist clan is trying to kill me with one strike? He shook his head gently and did not comment. He put his hands together and quickly pulled them apart. Grade 3 law skill under the heavens, everything is the king's land. Boom. A domain that covered the phantom of the blazing sun divine kingdom's territory suddenly expanded with Zhou Fai as the center. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the 20 supreme gods he had brought. Undo. He only said one word. The conceptual abilities of the 20 supreme gods under him vanished one after another. Some of the supreme gods who could not move, could not see, and had malfunctioning facial features also resolved the negative conceptual effects on their bodies and returned to normal. Medic. Zhou Fai said another word. He saw that the 20 supreme gods under him had all disappeared from the injuries they had just suffered. They were not even injured at all. It was as if they had not experienced a battle at all. The 20 supreme gods looked very surprised. Then, they quickly adjusted their mentality and fought with these demon infant and more than 50 illusionist clan members. As life forms derived from the conceptual god of the demon fetus, these demon infants did not have any strange conceptual god abilities. All they had were divine bodies comparable to supreme gods. The supreme gods under Zhou Fai's command had an easy time fighting against this group of fellows who only had the power of the divine body. As for the 50-odd close combat illusionist clan, after ignoring the influence of the conceptual god's ability, they were only slightly stronger than these demon infant. In the blink of an eye, the situation had reversed. When the demon fetus saw this scene, it immediately clenched its fists as its divine body trembled slightly. Damn it! What's this guy thinking? How can he ignore my conceptual divine powers? Could it be that he was a grade 3 supreme god realm on the surface, but in fact, he had already reached the level of supreme will? The demon fetus racked his brains and could only think of this reason. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to understand how the other party could ignore his conceptual god powers. Right at that moment, he saw General Zhou's gaze land on him. The demon fetus panicked. As a member of the conceptual god and god spirit system, the illusionist clan had a common weakness of the conceptual god system. That was, they were pitifully weak in other places once their conceptual divine power was cracked. Once their conceptual divine power was cracked, they would be pitifully weak in other places. This was the greatest weakness of the god spirit system, them. They couldn't even find other means to make up for it. This was because once they became a conceptual god, while they obtained super strong conceptual power, they also isolated themselves from the path of other cultivation systems. They could only follow the conceptual God system all the way up until they became existences at the top of the system. Therefore, when Zhou Fei's attention landed on him, the demon fetus could not help but panic. The eye of the demon fetus ability of him had been cracked. This also meant that he no longer had any means to deal with the common people's regal. Run! This thought instantly appeared in his mind. He looked a little hesitant, but then he firmed up this thought. Even though they, as the conceptual god of the illusionist clan, would not be killed so easily, after being killed, they would also be weakened for a long period of time. During this period of weakness, anything could happen, such as the other illusionist clan attacking their main body in the illusionist world. Once the original body was killed by the other illusionist clan, they would really die. Therefore, even though they was not afraid of death, they would still try their best to avoid death if possible. Therefore, the demon fetus immediately made a decision. Run! Without any hesitation, he turned around and instantly transmitted in the opposite direction of the Yellow River Emperor's sword. Zhou Fei's expression was calm as he thought of something. In the next second, his domain rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the escaping demon fetus. Then, Zhou Fei teleported he in front of him with a thought. So this is what the illusionist clan looks like. Tisk! It's ugly. Zhou Fei clicked his tongue and said. The demon fetus was still struggling to escape, but it immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. All the illusionist clan is like this. I'm considered handsome in the illusionist clan. You guys in this universe have the weirdest sense of beauty. You have no right to judge the aesthetics of our universe. Zhou Fei shook his head. He did not refute. How do you want to die? Die? The demon fetus laughed wildly as if it had heard something funny. You actually want to kill me? Even the supreme will of your universe and the Crimson Overlord can't kill us. You, a newly promoted Supreme Lord Reserve, actually want to kill me. You don't know your place. Young man, go to the Twilight battlefield more often to gain experience and broaden your horizons. In the future, don't say things that make me laugh. The demon fetus said disdainfully. Oh! Zhou Fei said indifferently. Then, he extended his right hand and saw an incomplete illusory seal quietly floating in his right hand. It was the fragment of the legendary tier illusionary sage seal, 3/5. The demon fetus was stunned by his actions. When he saw the seal in his hand, his pupils constricted slightly. Some memories that he was about to forget suddenly surged into his mind. He suddenly trembled as intense fear appeared on his face. This is the illusionary legendary tier sage seal. How could you have it? Wasn't it destroyed? He shrieked as if he had encountered the most terrifying thing in his life. I see you know it. So what can you tell me about it? Zhou Fei asked. No way, how could? How does this thing still exist? As if it could not hear Zhou Fei's voice, the demon fetus kept muttering to itself crazily. He did not have any other reaction until Zhou Fei borrowed the power of the illusionary legendary tier sage seal and slapped he to death. After killing them, he frowned slightly as he looked at the illusionary legendary tier sage seal in his hand. Illusionary legendary tier sage seal. How many more secrets do you have? Chapter 1727. Uncle Tu and the Yellow River Emperor's Sword. 1. Just as Zhou Fei killed the demon fetus. At the base camp of the illusionist clan in the Yellow River, an existence draped in a black cloak and shrouded in death and darkness was looking at the map in front of him. This land will be completely occupied by us when more than 90% of the Yellow River is currently occupied. When the demon fetus and Wu Shang completely conquer the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will. This existence muttered to himself in a low voice that contained an indescribable horror. A hole will be torn open in the supreme world as long as we completely occupy the Yellow River. At that time, we can carry out our next plan. At that time, the supreme great cosmos will be ours, the illusionary race. Then, we can use the supreme great cosmos as a starting point to invade the entire ultimate void world. Towards the end, his dark pupils burned with a huge ambition that other living beings would be afraid of. The worlds of reality and illusionary had been separated for too long. They needed to be unified by the illusionist clan and welcome the arrival of their king for the Lord's will. Right at that moment, a supreme god of the illusionary race ran in from outside the military tent in a panic. Reporting to the commander-in-chief, something big has happened. What's with the panic? The powerhouse of the illusionist clan, who was known as the commander, and also the highest authority and status of the illusionist clan in the Yellow River. Death Whisperer scolded him, "You have to be calm in the face of anything. Otherwise, why would I dare to let you control the army of our illusionist clan?" I. But this supreme god might have been so anxious that he stuttered, "But General Demon Fetus died. The demon fetus has fallen." The Death Whisperer was surprised. In order to snatch the inheritance of the Yellow River's will, they actually sent an expert stronger than the demon fetus? Could it be a quasi-supreme willpower realm expert? However, isn't the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will only open to existences below grade 4 supreme gods? Could it be that they sent a quasi-supreme will existence over to kill the demon fetus? The supreme will can actually do such a thing. The Death Whisperer frowned slightly. "Commander, you may have misunderstood me," the supreme god couldn't help but say when he saw the Death Whisperer talking to himself. "Say it all at once if you have something to say. Don't drag your feet. And is there anything wrong with what I'm saying?" The Death Whisperer frowned at him. It wasn't like there was a problem with his comprehension ability. He really didn't understand why this fellow kept saying that. He had misunderstood what he meant. "My lord, hear me out first. When I mentioned the death of General Demon Fetus just now, I didn't just mean that he died in the Yellow River. Most importantly, him in the illusionary world as well," the illusionary supreme god said. The Death Whisperer fell silent with his mouth opened wide. For a moment, he could not think of anything to say. After a long while, he asked dreamily, "You're saying that General Demon Fetus has completely died? He is also dead in the real world? He was killed by other hostile illusionary clansmen? Damn it! Didn't Your Excellency give the order long ago? We soldiers who are going to the ultimate void great cosmos will be protected by the laws of the illusionist world. No life form, including those of the illusionist clan who have grudges, is allowed to harm the main bodies of our soldiers during the expedition. His Excellency will personally punish us if we go against him. How dare they? You actually dare to plot against our general during our expedition? Aren't you afraid of delaying our military operations?" "No, it's already delayed. The General Demon Fetus is in charge of taking back the inheritance of the fallen will of the Yellow River today. He won't leave it for the supreme gods under the supreme will. Now that he is dead, it's very likely that the inheritance of the Yellow River's will fall into the hands of the subordinates of the supreme will." The Death Whisperer frowned slightly. If that really happened, he would not be able to escape punishment. This was because once the other party obtained the inheritance of the Yellow River's will, it was very likely that another second-generation Yellow River's will would be born in the near future. That was a supreme will realm expert. They were considered top-notch experts even on the side of the illusionist clan. Such an expert had the ability to influence the war situation. "It's a big deal," the Death Whisperer muttered. "My lord, that doesn't seem to be the case. The illusionary world didn't send us the news that General Demon Fetus was assassinated by the enemy. According to our intelligence, General Demon Fetus disappeared in the main world after he died in the Yellow River. Because the power of his imagination has been completely cut off," the Supreme God Illusionist clan said. "You mean the fellow who killed General Demon Fetus has the means to kill General Demon Fetus at the same time? So with the death of the Demon Fetus General, the power of his imagination was completely severed and he could no longer be revived from his imagination." The Death Whisperer raised his eyebrows and said, "That's my guess. This is the only explanation my subordinate can think of after hearing this information." The Supreme God braced himself and said, "No way." The Death Whisperer rejected immediately. If there were experts in the Supreme Great Cosmos who had such methods, they would have used them long ago. How could they suddenly use them on one of our supreme gods today? Chapter 1728. Uncle Two and the Yellow River Emperor's Sword. 2. To be able to completely cut off the source of the imagination of the illusionary race while killing the main body, if the other party really mastered such a method, how could they tolerate us until now? The Supreme God stopped talking. He also found it strange. However, he really didn't know what the other reasons could be other than what he had just guessed. The Death Whisperer suddenly fell silent after he refuted. That was because he suddenly thought of something. He recalled the purpose of them coming to the ultimate void great cosmos. They came to the ultimate void great cosmos for two purposes. The first goal was naturally to conquer and occupy the entire ultimate void great cosmos and help lord them break the boundary between reality and illusionary and become an eternal realm expert. This was the ultimate goal of them coming here. The second goal was to look for fragments of an item. That thing was called the illusionary legendary Tear Sage Seal. It was said that this legendary Tear Sage Seal was born from a top powerhouse of their illusionary clan. He was originally a conceptual god of the illusionist clan who had the ability to refine weapons. Later on, he continued to improve and develop his conceptual divine power. He actually created a supreme treasure comparable to an immortal artifact at the eternal immortal realm. The effect of that immortal weapon was also very simple and violent. That was to control, enslave, hurt, and kill the illusionist clan. The whole thing was ridiculous. He was clearly a conceptual god of the illusionist clan, but in order to fulfill his ambition and become the ruler of the illusionist clan, he actually treated the billions of illusionist clan as the best and created a deadly divine artifact that could exterminate them. With the help of the legendary Tear Sage Seal, the refiner who had that deadly divine artifact had undoubtedly become the ruler of the illusionist clan of that era. However, good times don't last. While he had an illusionary legendary Tear Holy artifact that was comparable to the eternal immortal realm. However, his divine spirit realm was still at the upper willpower level. The difficulty of advancing to the eternal immortal realm was so great that even a refiner who had mastered the legendary Tear Sage Seal and all the resources of the entire illusionist clan could not break through the bottleneck and become a true eternal immortal realm expert. So on a quiet night, more than 1,000 top-notch experts of the illusionist clan attacked this refiner together. After about 80% of the top-notch experts of the illusionist clan died, they finally shattered the treasure that was comparable to an immortal artifact with their strategy. They lost their greatest asset once their refiner was killed and were defeated. As for the illusionary legendary Tear Sage Seal that had shattered into 5 pieces, even if it had turned into fragments, it still attracted the greed of many experts who participated in the battle. However, they were still afraid of this pseudo-immortal artifact that could bring about the danger of extermination to them. They joined forces to seal it and gave the seal to the illusionary origin of the world where the illusionist clan was. The illusionary origin was supreme. In the world of the illusionary race, it was equivalent to the will of the great Dao of the immortal world. It was impartial and handed over to him to preserve this sealed treasure. They were the most at case. They thought this would be over. Unexpectedly, the illusionary origin suddenly sent a message before they conquered the ultimate void great cosmos this time, saying that he had a secret confrontation with the will of the great origin of the ultimate void great cosmos. After this confrontation, neither side could do anything to the other. However, the seal controlled by them surprisingly loosened. The 5 fragments of the legendary Tear Sage Seal inside the seal flew out on their own accord and left the void world to come to the ultimate void great cosmos. The illusionary origin asked them to try their best to bring back the fragments of the 5 illusionary legendary Tear Sacred Seals in addition to conquering the ultimate void great cosmos in this war to prevent them from being left outside and becoming a weapon for enemies to deal with them in the future. Hence, they brought these 2 missions to the ultimate void great cosmos. Could it really be a fragment of the illusionary legendary Tear Sage Seal? The Death Whisperer muttered. Then, his expression turned decisive. He could not let it go even if there was only a sliver of a possibility. The illusionary legendary Tear Sage Seal was very important. If it was really controlled by the living beings of the ultimate void great cosmos, it would not be them invading the ultimate void great cosmos, but the ultimate void great cosmos invading their illusionary world. The legendary Tear Sage Seal was too effective against their illusionist clan. With this in mind, he immediately stood up and ordered. Lead all the soldiers who are not fighting to the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will. Yes, Your Majesty. The Supreme God said respectfully and immediately went to gather the troops. Even though they had invested their main forces and generals in guarding the Yellow River, it was more than enough to transfer some powerful soldiers and generals from the remaining troops to do other things. The army of the illusionary race was gathered. The Death Whisperer led the army to the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will without another word. On the other side, after Zhou Fight killed the demon fetus and the supreme gods and demon infant of the illusionist clan under him, he did not waste any time and immediately went to the location of the Yellow River Emperor's sword. When they arrived at the location of the Yellow River Emperor's sword, they saw a creature with a tiger head, a cow body, and 3 eyes on its head catching ghosts to eat. This fellow saw Zhou Fight and them and he immediately stopped what he was doing and sized up Zhou Fight and the others. Zhou Fight was also sizing him up. When he saw the other party's appearance, he only needed to flip through the bloodline inheritance in his mind to recognize who this fellow was. Uncle Tu. The gatekeeper of the Netherworld Gate. He had a righteous personality and loved to eat those unruly evil spirits. Right at that moment, Uncle Tu also recognized Zhou Fight and bowed respectfully. Greetings, Supreme Lord 3rd Reserve Army. You're well informed. Zhou Fight chuckled. Both Illusionist Clan and His Highness Tian Yang Wazu of the Sun Divine Court still thought that he was the 4th Reserve Army. Actually, it was understandable. His main body had just been promoted today. However, this ordinary-looking Uncle Tu actually knew about the advancement of his identity first. That was already very impressive. Your Excellency. There's no lack of God Spirit level souls amongst the more than a trillion souls that I see every day. I found out from them that you've been promoted to the 3rd Reserve Army. Uncle Tu said respectfully. Zhou Fight nodded. He often heard from other God Spirits that the God Spirits of the Netherworld were well informed. He had seen it for himself this time. You're guarding the Yellow River Emperor's sword, right? Zhou Fight asked. His tone was very certain despite the question. Your Highness is right. I've been guarding the Yellow River Emperor's sword for a long time. I also know the conditions of clearing it left behind by the will of the Yellow River. It's actually very simple for your Highness to obtain the Yellow River Emperor's sword in my hand. You just have to defeat me. Uncle Tu said. Surprise flashed across Zhou Fight's eyes. Bro, are you serious? I think you're just a Master God tier elementary grade God Spirit. How dare you challenge me? Uncle Tu also saw the meaning in Zhou Fight's eaves. He chuckled and said, Your Highness, don't underestimate me. Even though I'm only at the level of a Master God tier elementary grade God Spirit on the surface. But I have the protection of the Yellow River realm. The Yellow River will give me the strength to protect the Yellow River Emperor's sword. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to protect the Yellow River Emperor's sword for so many years without losing it. Zhou Zhou was interested. Come on. This Emperor will personally come and try you on. Zhou Fight asked. I understand. Uncle Tu nodded and opened his bloody mouth. The next second, endless unconscious souls appeared in the world. There were more than a trillion unconscious souls, but at this moment, they all flew into Uncle Tu's stomach like rivers returning to the sea and became a part of his strength. Uncle Tu's body began to expand rapidly, and his strength also began to increase rapidly. Master God tier elementary grade. Master God tier advanced grade. Grade 1 Supreme God. Grade 4 Supreme God. Low-level Supreme Will Realm. His rapid advancement only stopped when his body size increased to the top of the Yellow River Realm and his strength increased to the low-level Supreme Will Realm. The Supreme Lord's 3rd Reserve Army. Uncle Tu's head was above the sky and his feet were on the ground. His voice rumbled like a chaotic giant. Would your humble servant be so bold as to ask for a battle with you? Zhou Fight. Chapter 1729. The Master of the Yellow River Emperor's Sword. 1. Zhou Fight looked at Uncle Tu, who was emitting the aura of the Supreme Will Realm in front of him, and the corners of his mouth could not help but twitch. I'm going up against a Supreme Will Realm expert? You really think highly of me? Uncle Tu thought that Zhou Fight was afraid and saw the hesitation on his face. Sir, you don't have to worry. Just attack. He said while laughing inwardly. You don't have to defeat me. You just have to perform a battle that satisfies me. I can give you the Yellow River Emperor's sword. Lord Yellow River set up this test when he was alive only to select suitable talents. It's not to select an existence who can go against the Supreme Will Realm at the Supreme God Realm. It's impossible to imagine such an existence. If it's really to select such an existence, the Yellow River Emperor's sword will probably never be able to find its master. Zhou Fight hesitated for a moment as if he was thinking about something. Then, he nodded and said. Okay. Let's give it a try now. A faint smile appeared on Uncle Tu's face. He extended his right hand and invited, Your Majesty, come and attack. He had pride in his heart. How could he, an expert who temporarily had the strength of the Supreme Will Realm under the protection of the Yellow River Realm, attack first? That would be too embarrassing. Letting the other party attack first and then easily defeat the enemy before giving the other party some pointers was in line with his current expert temperament. Okay. Then this emperor won't stand during the ceremony? Zhou Fight asked. Uncle Tu laughed to himself. You're welcome. Can a grade 3 Supreme God Realm not be polite to a Supreme Will Realm expert? His Majesty is really humoro. Hey! He suddenly felt a tremendous pressure descend on him just as he had this thought. Quasi-Supreme Will Law Skill. All the land in the world belongs to the king. Under the suppression of this domain, he, who had only reached the Supreme Will Realm, was suppressed again. Uncle Tu was shocked. What kind of method is this? It could actually let a grade 3 Supreme God Realm suppress a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert? When Zhou Fight saw this, a faint smile appeared on his face. It was true that he was originally a grade 3 Supreme God Realm. However, his strength directly increased to the quasi-Supreme Will Realm, second only to Supreme Will Realm experts when he used King the other day. Even though all the land in the world belongs to the king, that was displayed from this had yet to reach the top-notch quasi-Supreme Will Realm in terms of nomological comprehension. Just by relying on the accumulation of divine power, his all the land in the world belongs to the king had reached the level of an ordinary quasi-Supreme Will Realm. The grade 3 Supreme God Realm all the land in the world belongs to the king could slightly suppress the will domain of a low-level Supreme Will Realm. As for the ordinary quasi-Supreme Will Realm all the land in the world belongs to the king, it could already completely suppress the low-level Supreme Will Realm Will Sacred Domain. Therefore, Uncle Tu's strength immediately decreased greatly when Zhou Fight unleashed his domain and let it suppress Uncle Tu's strength. Even though he had yet to fall out of the low-level Supreme Will Realm, he was much weaker than before. Uncle Tu quickly recovered from his shock. Perhaps this is the method of the Supreme Lord's Third Reserve Army. Uncle Tu didn't think too much about it. In his eyes, as the successor of the Supreme Lord's Reserve Army, it was not strange for him to have any powerful methods. He smiled again. The Supreme Lord's Third Reserve Army. It's not enough to satisfy me, this is all you can muster. Ha 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 ha. Uncle Tu laughed wildly after saying that, perhaps from the confidence that Eli's explosive strength gave him. Oh! A smile appeared on Zhou Fight's face. Is there really no way to satisfy him? However, why did he no longer feel that the current Uncle Tu was as threatening as he had imagined? He walked out slowly and looked straight at Uncle Tu. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. This is the first time this emperor is fighting a Supreme Will Realm expert. Uncle Tuesday. I hope this battle can satisfy the emperor and you. He smiled and said. Uncle Tu was stunned. Then, he smiled. This Third Reserve Army member of the Supreme Lord was really bold. That's what I want. You can't take away this Yellow River Emperor sword if you don't let me have my fill, even if you're the successor of the Supreme Will. Okay. A shocking divine light suddenly erupted from Zhou Fight's eyes. He suddenly shot into the sky and slapped down at Uncle Tu with all his might. Quasi-Supreme Will Realm Law Skill Myriad Method Star Palm. Rumble. A huge golden palm that could blot out the sky condensed out of thin air. The patterns of the blazing sun divine kingdom's territory vaguely appeared on it. It descended from the sky and landed on Uncle Tu like the sky was collapsing. Uncle Tu's expression changed when he saw this. This was because he actually felt a fatal threat from this palm. If this palm landed, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. His heart was filled with shock. Could this be an attack that could only be launched by a grade 3 Supreme God Realm? What kind of joke is this? Even if the other party was a Supreme Lord Reserve Army, it would not be so ridiculous, right? There was no time to think. Uncle Tu opened his mouth and a suction force suddenly appeared. This suction force was extremely strange. Zhou Fight actually felt that the power of the Myriad Method Star Palm had decreased by a portion after it landed on his Myriad Method Star Palm. Still, just the drop was not enough block my Myriad Method Star Palm. Zhou Fight's eyes lit up. The power of the Myriad Method Star Palm had actually increased to another level at this moment. Chapter 1730. The Master of the Yellow River Emperor Sword. 2. When Uncle Tu sensed the Myriad Method Star Palm that suddenly increased in power, his expression changed again. The common people's regal actually didn't use his full strength just now. This is too exaggerated. This time, Uncle Tu didn't dare to take it head-on and immediately retreated, wanting to dodge. However, the Myriad Method Star Palm contained the endless laws of the heavens and had long locked onto Uncle Tu. Even though Uncle Tu was now a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, it was difficult for him to dodge. He had no choice but to take this punch forcefully. Rumble. The Yellow River shook as if an earthquake had arrived, causing dust to rise. The gods looked over nervously. Ahem. Uncle Tu's cough came from the smoke and dust, and he walked out unscathed. Your Excellency, common people's regal, good move. Uncle Tu praised resentfully. You're the first person who can withstand this Emperor's palm strike and not die. Zhou Fight also praised. He wasn't lying. Ever since Zhou Fight was born, no one who dared to take his Myriad Method Star Palm head-on survived. Uncle Tu was indeed the first. Uncle Tu was silent. However, when he recalled the power of the palm just now, he somewhat understood. That's true. Apart from the Supreme Will Realm and stronger existences, who could withstand that palm? It was indeed very likely that he was the first to survive this palm strike. You want to go on? Zhou Fight asked. Again. This time I'm going all out. Uncle Tu gritted his teeth. He was unwilling to be knocked down by a grade 3 Supreme God Realm until he did not dare to accept the challenge. Even if the other party was a Supreme Lord Reserve Army. Okay. Zhou Fight nodded. It had only been one move, and he hadn't had enough. At this moment, Uncle Tu also used a new method. A divine sword that was completely yellow and emitted a majestic aura appeared in his hand. As soon as this sword appeared, it had the aura of ruling the fate of billions of life forms and making them submit. The yellow river trembled slightly at this moment, as if it was welcoming the arrival of an emperor. Zhou Fight's expression changed. This is the Yellow River Emperor sword? Its aura is extraordinary, as expected. Looking at the grade, it should be at least a low-level will holy artifact. It could even be higher. Your Excellency Common People's Regal, take a look at the power of this Yellow River's first sword. Uncle Tu shouted. Then, he waved the Yellow River Emperor sword at Zhou Fight and the scene in front of Zhou Fight suddenly changed. Uncle Tu had clearly only brandished a sword chi, but in Zhou Fight's eyes, it was not sword chi. Instead, the trillions of undying undead in the Yellow River attacked him together. This is... The entire Yellow River is hostile to me. The Yellow River Emperor sword isn't the one attacking me but the entire Yellow River realm. The Yellow River Emperor sword is mobilizing the power of the entire Yellow River realm. Zhou Fight was extremely knowledgeable. He immediately realized the source of the Yellow River Emperor sword's power. He sighed inwardly. As expected of the Yellow River Emperor sword. Expected of the number 1. Of the Yellow River. It was indeed worthy of its reputation. However, this did not instill fear in Zhou Fight. Instead, it made him even more active. He held his head high and puffed out his chest. His eyes lit up as he looked at the sword in front of him that gathered the power of billions of Yellow River souls. Then, he slapped out the first myriad method star palm. Then the second myriad method star palm. The third strike. The fourth strike. In the blink of an eye, Zhou Fight had actually slapped out more than 100 myriad method star palms. These myriad method star palms were released almost at the same time and attacked the trillions of souls of the Yellow River. Great! Great! Zhou Fight laughed arrogantly as he attacked. It had been a long time since he had experienced such a hearty battle. Uncle Tu was secretly shocked when he saw this. Oh my god! Just how much Supreme Will's supreme divine power is there in the Third Reserve Army? He could actually slap out more than 100 with a palm that was comparable to the low-level Supreme Will realm. Could the supreme power in his body be endless? Still. Uncle Tu shook his head secretly seeing him attack so crazily. It seemed like he could not obtain the Yellow River Emperor sword. At that moment, he seemed to have suddenly discovered something as his eyes widened. This is... None of the Yellow River souls were injured wherever the 100-odd myriad method star palm passed. Instead, they fused into the myriad method star palm and became a part of it. After these Yellow River souls discovered the unfamiliar environment around them, they were somewhat dumbfounded. Didn't they just committed suicide? Why did they appear here in the blink of an eye? Was this still the Yellow River? Right at that moment, Zhou Fight's voice sounded from within the myriad method star palm. This is the nomological world inside the myriad method star palm. It can temporarily accommodate you. You don't have any ill intentions towards this emperor. You only attacked this emperor because of the use of the Yellow River Emperor sword. You're not at fault. Don't worry. When this emperor defeats this Uncle Tu, he will let you out and let you return to your normal life as ghosts. Now, please wait quietly for the battle to end. The souls looked at each other and said respectfully. Thank you for your kindness, Your Excellency Common People's Regal. I'll be waiting. A calm and open voice sounded, making the trillions of souls feel even more at ease. As expected of the Supreme Lord's Reserve Army force in the name of the common people. They indeed pity us. They are actually considering our survival during the war and are not killing the innocent. A dead soul praised. The reputation of the common people's regal and the blazing sun divine kingdom has long spread throughout the myriad worlds. I originally wanted to go to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom to be a subject of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, but unfortunately, I died in an accident. I hope that I can reincarnate into the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom in the next life and become a Blazing Sun citizen. Dream on. I won't ask for much. It's fine as long as I'm born and raised normally and can go to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. I heard that the immigration procedures for the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom aren't difficult. I can join the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom normally as long as I'm not an evil person. If I'm a person with high morals, it's said that I'll be given preferential treatment after I emigrate. Can Yellow River still undergo reincarnation now? Imph. The common people's regal is invincible. Since the Lord Common People's regal is here, sooner or later, Yellow River will return to the hands of the Supreme. Won't we be able to reincarnate normally then? I hope so. In the outside world, when General Zhou's trillions of souls were gathered into the inner space of his myriad method star palm, he discovered that the sword energy of the Yellow River Emperor sword gradually disappeared. The Emperor was the ruler of the people. There would be no Emperor without the people. After Zhou Fight sensed the mystery of the Yellow River Emperor sword, he could not help but smile. This Yellow River Emperor sword was quite interesting. Just as he was prepared to continue attacking Uncle Tu and see what other tricks he had up his sleeve. Ha 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 ha. Uncle Tu's carefree laughter came from below. He took a few slow steps forward and raised his hand to call Zhou Fight down. Your Excellency, Common People's Regal. Come on down. This officer concedes. You have won this battle between you and me. Uncle Tu chuckled. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. He thought for a moment and flew down to Uncle Tu. Why did this emperor suddenly win? He asked directly. Your Excellency, you need to satisfy me when you obtain the Yellow River Emperor sword. The condition to satisfy me is actually whether your Majesty has a benevolent heart. Your Excellency undoubtedly has a benevolent heart, judging from how your Excellency used more than 100 myriad method star palms just now without harming a soul. I'm satisfied. The spirit of the Yellow River Emperor sword must be very satisfied too. Your Excellency. Uncle Tu held the sword with both hands and handed it to Zhou Fight. This Yellow River Emperor sword belongs to the benevolent lord, and now, it belongs to you. He said sincerely. From today onwards, you are the new master of the Yellow River Emperor sword. Chapter 1731. The Yellow River Emperor sword. 1. Zhou Fight was stunned for a moment before nodding with a smile. This test of the Yellow River Emperor sword was quite interesting. Il did not expect that his subconscious actions would actually become the key to passing the test of the Yellow River Emperor sword. Il did not think too much about it as IE took the Yellow River Emperor sword and looked at it. Information about the holy artifact appeared. Holy artifact name, Yellow River Emperor sword. Holy artifact grade, high level will holy artifact. Holy artifact will 1 Yellow River Regal, a living being who holds the Yellow River Emperor sword and is recognized by the spirit of the Yellow River Emperor sword is the ruler of the Yellow River region. The ruler of the Yellow River region is above all existences in the Yellow River region and can command any Yellow River citizens in the Yellow River region. Ioli artifact will 2 Yellow River Saha / the Yellow River Emperor sword is a holy artifact formed from the source of the Yellow River realm. It can control all the power of the Yellow River realm. The wielder can release the Yellow River Saha / and unleash an attack that exceeds the limit of the Supreme Will realm to kill all enemies in front of you. Note 1, this will power skill can only be used once a year. Holy artifact will 3 Yellow River Paramita, the Yellow River Thearch sword controls the power of the will of life and death reincarnation. The owner of the Yellow River Thearch sword can send the soul of any life form back to the myriad worlds every day and complete his own resurrection. The highest level of resurrection is a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Ioli artifact will 4 Key of Yellow River, Part 1 The Yellow River Emperor sword and the Yellow River Stone slab are the 2 keys to unlock the inheritance of the will of Yellow River. With them, you will have a chance to open the inheritance of the will of Yellow River in the future and obtain all the inheritance of the will of Yellow River. Prompt, requires willpower to recognize a master. Hiss. Zhou Fight took a deep breath after reading it. Good God! It was actually a high-level will holy artifact? This Yellow River will was not famous when it was alive. He did not expect the will holy artifact in his hand to be a top-notch will holy artifact. Impressive. Moreover, a life form with the Yellow River Emperor sword was the master of the Yellow River realm? This was the territory of a Supreme Will realm existence. Moreover, this territory was connected to the land of the living and the netherworld. Be it in importance, symbolism, or other aspects, it was definitely among the top 10 in the myriad worlds. He had obtained everything now that he had obtained the Yellow River Emperor's sword. Zhou Fai looked at the Yellow River Emperor's sword in his hand and felt as if he had fallen into a dream. It didn't seem real. At this moment, Uncle Tu's voice awakened him. Your Majesty. Uncle Tu changed the way he addressed Zhou Fai and said respectfully, You've already obtained the Yellow River Emperor's sword. It's time to fight for the inheritance of Yellow River's will. I can already feel that the Yellow River slate has a new master. This is the best time to go. In addition, I'd like to say something here. I feel that in the entire myriad worlds, only you are most qualified to take over the position of Lord Yellow River's will. If this position is eventually taken by someone else, or even our enemies, I will be very sad. Zhou Fai nodded. Then, he suddenly asked, if this emperor didn't get the Yellow River Emperor's sword this time, but the guy from the illusionist clan did, how would things develop? The illusionist clan is evil by nature. They can't control the Yellow River Emperor's sword that represents mercy. After Uncle Tu finished speaking, he revealed a sinister and terrifying smile. Even if they really used a strange or forceful method to obtain the Yellow River Emperor's sword, I will bring the Yellow River Emperor's sword along with me even if I have to disobey the will of Yellow River. The Yellow River Emperor's sword will never be handed over to the murderer of the Yellow River's will. Uncle Tu's eyes were still filled with hatred. He was an old man who had been here since the birth of Yellow River. The relationship between him and the will of Yellow River was not like the relationship between a subordinate and a king, but more like the relationship between a younger brother and sister. Therefore, Uncle Tu absolutely hated the murderer who killed the will of Yellow River. Zhou Fai nodded silently. This emperor promises you. Zhou Fai said, the inheritance of the will of Yellow River will be inherited by this emperor. Even if the other party is at the supreme will realm, they won't snatch the inheritance of the Yellow River's will from this emperor. Uncle Tu's eyes lit up when he heard this, as if he had a new hope. May your Majesty return in triumph. He said seriously. Zhou Fai nodded and he left with the 20 supreme gods. Uncle Tu looked at Zhou Fai's departing figure and couldn't help but sigh. His Majesty is so confident. He has never fought with the illusionist clan, but he is sure that he would win. I was wondering if I should warn His Majesty to be careful of the enemy's strange methods, but, let's forget it. His Majesty should be invincible. He smiled and turned to leave. The duty of guarding the sword had already disappeared. It was time for Ilum to live the life he wanted. If one day, the will of Yellow River could be revived, he would return here. At the same time, Zhou Fai flew towards the Yellow River slate at his fastest speed. He could sense the location of the Yellow River slate with the Yellow River Emperor's sword in his hand. Presumably, the other party was the same. Will the other party come looking for me? This thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Il did not make any further guesses. He did some calculations in Il's mind and frowned slightly. Then, he suddenly sneered. Swoosh! His figure and the 20 supreme gods behind him instantly disappeared into thin air. Wu Shang stood in front of the gate of the Yellow River quietly. Chapter 1732. The Yellow River Emperor's Sword. 2. Not far behind him were Tianyang Wuzhu, Prime Minister Wu, and the 20 supreme gods he had brought. However, Tianyang Wuzhu didn't seem to be in a good state. His face was pale, and the aura on his body was also very unstable. He seemed to have suffered serious injuries. Beside him, Prime Minister Wu looked anxious, but there was nothing he could do about Tianyang Wuzhu's injuries. He could only watch anxiously. At this moment, Zhou Fai led the 20 supreme gods and appeared above them before slowly flying down. He took a look at Wu Shang, whose gaze had turned cold. Then, he looked at Tianyang Wuzhu. Tianyang Wuzhu looked at Zhou Fai, who was unharmed, and immediately felt very embarrassed. He turned his head away and did not look into Zhou Fai's eyes. Zhou Fai did not mind. His gaze landed on Tianyang Wuzhu and the half of the Yellow River stone slab on Wu Shang's body. He couldn't help but purse his lips. You're really something. A good Yellow River slate was broken into two by you. However, this emperor is very curious. This Yellow River slate should also be a will-holy artifact, right? How did you guys break it? This thing was broken in the first place. It must have been made in the past. Tianyang Wuzhu turned around and looked at Zhou Fai. He said in a deep voice, that's why we split it into two when we fought with this guy. Zhou Fai was enlightened. I told you so. How could two supreme gods break a will-holy artifact? If that was the case, then he would turn around and run. This was because he couldn't damage the will-holy artifact now. Hey, kid! At this moment, Wu Shang stared at Zhou Fight and the Yellow River Emperor sword on his back and asked, "Where's the demon fetus?" "You guess." Zhou Fight looked at him with a faint smile. "You killed him. Wu Shang said. "Means you are not foolish." Zhou Fight nodded. Wu Shang was silent for a while. He shook his head and sighed, as expected of the common people's regal. "None of you four Supreme Lord Reserve Army are simple." Zhou Fight gave a strange smile. It seemed that he still did not know that the demon fetus had completely perished and could no longer be reborn from the power of imagination. Otherwise, he would definitely not have such a reaction now. At this moment, Wu Shang's voice sounded again. "But it doesn't matter. The demon fetus is dead, but I can avenge him later. After the demon fetus is resurrected, I will personally tell him the news of your death, increasing his joy of being resurrected." "You won't have that day." Zhou Fight shook his head. When Wu Shang heard this, he thought that the other party was saying that he could deal with him today. He could not help but grin. "It's good to be inexperienced. You're so brave when you talk and do things. Too bad. The three of us are now holding the Yellow River treasure. We can't fight directly under the rules of the Yellow River's will. Otherwise, we'll deal with you now, and we won't have to waste time with you here." Wu Shang smiled faintly. Zhou Fight smiled and did not say anything else. Wu Shang did not say anything. Let's see who gets the last laugh later. On the other side, Tianyang Wazhou felt humiliated when he saw the two competitors ignoring him. However, he was also looking at Zhou Fight in shock at the same time. That demon fetus was actually killed by this guy? No matter how weak a guy who could be with Wu Shang was, he shouldn't be too weak, right? However, such an expert was actually eliminated by this common people's regal in such a short period of time. On the other hand, even though he had tried his best to snatch half of the Yellow River slate from the other party, he had also been severely injured by the other party. He did not have the slightest confidence in fighting for the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. Thinking of this, he could not help but fall silent. This common people's regal seemed to have exceeded his imagination. He thought for a moment and transmitted his voice to Zhou Fight. Wu Shang's conceptual divine ability is an ability to keep oneself unharmed. This ability is very difficult to deal with. No matter how much effort you use to severely injure or even close to death, the other party can recover in an instant and seem to be able to do so without any cost. If not for this guy's ridiculous conceptual god ability, how could I have been beaten up like this? Tianyang Wazhou's angry voice sounded in Zhou Fight's mind. Zhou Fight was stunned when he heard this. Then, he looked at Tianyang Wazhou in wonder. This guy. He had thought that the other party was arrogant. However, from the looks of it, even though the other party was arrogant, he still had a plan. At the very least, he knew that he had to join forces with his own people to deal with the powerful enemy in front of him. He did not want to hide it and watch his own people make a fool of themselves. Zhou Fight could not help but change his opinion of this guy. Besides, a conceptual god ability that allowed him to be unharmed and didn't require any price to be paid? It does sound tricky. Zhou Fight was deep in thought. However, there must be a solution. Conceptual gods were never an invincible extraordinary tier system. If he was really invincible, then the entire myriad worlds would join the conceptual god cultivation system. The biggest disadvantage of an extraordinary tier system like the conceptual god system was that no matter how powerful a conceptual god cultivator's conceptual god ability was, it definitely had a fatal flaw. This fatal flaw could even turn the conceptual god's ability into nothingness, allowing the conceptual god to be killed by ordinary life forms bark-handed. He thought for a moment and stopped thinking about it. There wasn't much evidence, so no matter how much he thought about it, it was all in vain. Let's wait and see when we actually fight. Thinking of this, he came to the door of the Yellow River and took out the Yellow River Emperor sword on his back. The Yellow River Emperor sword seemed to have been summoned by something as soon as he took it out. It suddenly flew out of his hands and rushed straight for the door to the Yellow River. Finally, it stuck into a sword-shaped depression on the left side of the door to the Yellow River, perfectly overlapping with the sword-shaped depression. Seeing this, Wu Shang grinned and let go of the half of the Yellow River stone slab in his hand indifferently. He let the half of the Yellow River stone slab fly to a stone slab-shaped depression on the right side of the door of the Yellow River and merge with the stone slab. Tianyang Huazhu also let go of the other Yellow River stone slab in his hand and fused it with the other half of the stone slab. When the Yellow River Emperor sword and the Yellow River slate perfectly overlapped and caved in, the entire gate of the Yellow River shook. The entire Yellow River domain shook greatly. The trillions of souls were all shocked, not knowing what had happened. What a troubled world! Some of the souls sighed with emotion and panic. At the same time, the moment the door to the Yellow River opened, Zhou Fight, Wu Shang, and Tianyang Huazhu immediately rushed in with their subordinates. When they rushed in, they saw a huge yellow arena and a huge phantom floating above it. Zhou Fight was very familiar with this phantom. This was because the clones of the main body had already seen the main body of this phantom several times in the time world. He was the phantom of Yellow River's will. Right at that moment, the phantom of Yellow River's will spoke. I am the phantom of Yellow River's will. Since you can see me, it means that I have already given up my position as the Lord of the Yellow River, or that I have already died. Never mind the past. Next, the three of you will fight for the position of Lord of the Yellow River. I will store all the treasures here and the Supreme Will Realm inheritance I left here. When I was alive, I had already cultivated it to the high-level Supreme Will Realm and was only a step away from the Will Realm. Unfortunately, I failed to advance in the end. All my cultivation experience was left here. I'm sure you'll be more interested in such a legacy. After saying that, both Wu Shang and Tianyang Huazhu revealed shocked and ecstatic expressions. It was actually a high-level Supreme Will Realm inheritance. This was a top-rated Supreme Will Realm inheritance. Whoever could obtain it would be able to enjoy it for the rest of their lives. In the future, they would even be qualified to see the scenery at the peak. Zhou Fight was also pretty surprised. He did not expect Yellow River's will to hide it so deeply. A high-level Supreme Will Realm expert was a top expert. They were considered the top even among the many Supreme Will Realm experts under the Supreme Will. Yellow River was so low-key that it was simply ridiculous. Chapter 1733 Wu Shang vs. Tianyang Huazhu 1. Zhou Fight had a strange expression on his face. The phantom of Yellow River's will did not notice the strange expression on Zhou Fight's face. He slowly said to Zhou Fight and the other two. There's only one way to get my legacy and treasures. And that's winner takes all. The three of you are about to engage in an unlimited showdown. Whoever survives shall have what I have left. The phantom of Yellow River's will said indifferently. That's pretty rough. But I like it. Zhou Fight stroked his chin and thought. Hearing this, Wu Shang turned to look at Zhou Fight and Tianyang Huazhu. A ferocious and murderous smile appeared on his face. Only Tianyang Huazhu and his subordinates' expressions darkened. This test method was the last thing they wanted to see. Especially for the severely injured Tianyang Huazhu, it was definitely bad news. Who asked his combat power to decrease at this moment? He couldn't defeat Wu Shang and the common people's regal at all. Lord Yellow River's will. Tianyang Huazhu suddenly pointed at Wu Shang and said, this guy is the enemy of the illusionist clan. Do you really want him to participate in your inheritance selection? Zhou Fight looked at Tianyang Huazhu, then at Wu Shang. Then, he discovered that not only did Wu Shang not panic after hearing Tianyang Huazhu's words, but he also revealed a calm smile. It was as if he was not afraid of the consequences of Tianyang Huazhu's words. When Zhou Fight saw this, he had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the will of Yellow River glanced at Tianyang Huazhu indifferently and said, I have my own decision. Tianyang Huazhu's heart sank. He was so angry that he almost spewed out his anger. What was the will of Yellow River doing? Was he going to hand over Ili's inheritance to Ili's enemy? He originally thought that even if he might not be able to defeat these two guys, Il should leave the inheritance to the common people's regal and not this Wu Shang from the illusionary race. But from the looks of it, he could not change the current situation. Zhou Fight fell into deep thought after hearing it. Could the will of the Yellow River really had some kind of concealment technique and was not afraid that the illusionist clan would obtain the inheritance and treasures left behind by him? He had some guesses. That was all he had to say. No matter how many thoughts Zhou Fight and Tianyang Huazhu had, they could no longer stop Wu Shang from participating in this inheritance competition. A faint yellow light barrier suddenly appeared on the yellow arena below the phantom of Yellow River's will, enveloping the entire arena. Then, Yellow River's will said. This arena is the arena where you will fight next. You can bring your subordinates to participate in the battle, but the number of subordinates cannot exceed 20, and the highest strength of each subordinate cannot Exceed the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. This arena contains an unlimited amount of space, enough for you to use your hands and feet to defeat your enemies. The one who survives to the end will be the new ruler of the Yellow River region. Go. After saying that, the Yellow Rivers will stop talking. Ha 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 ha. I'll show you the combat ability of the king of Wushang. Wushang looked at Zhou Fight and Tianyang Wazu in disdain, as if he was looking at the two defeated opponents. He laughed and flew into the arena with the 20 supreme gods of the illusionist clan. Then, he made a provocative gesture to Zhou Fight and Tianyang Wazu. When Zhou Fight saw this, he ignored this fellow's boring provocation and did not follow the flying arena. Instead, he looked at Tianyang Wazu and asked, "Are you going to the ring?" "None of your business," Tianyang Wazu said coldly. Then, he took out a medicinal pill that emitted a rich heaven and earth origin chi and swallowed it in one bite. 9 Saint Heaven and Earth Pill. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. This medicinal pill was extraordinary. This was a pseudo-Supreme Will Realm medicinal pill that was said to be refined by only Supreme Will Realm experts. The life forms below the Supreme God level who took this pill would recover instantly no matter how serious their injuries were. Moreover, in the next year, if they suffered fatal injuries, the remaining medicinal power of this 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill would save them once and could save them 9 times in a row. After 9 times, the medicinal power of the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill would disappear, no longer having the life-saving effect from before. It could be said that a 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill was almost equivalent to giving a life form below the Supreme God level 10 life-saving chances. This effect was even stronger than the 9-tailed fox's self-protection ability. Unfortunately, this 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill only worked on life forms below the Supreme God level. However, the total value of the materials used to refine it could be used to refine several types of Supreme Will Realm medicinal pills. In terms of cost-performance ratio alone, it was extremely low. However, if he encountered a Supreme Will Realm expert who wanted to give him some methods to protect his juniors, then this 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill was the best choice. Generally speaking, only extremely wealthy Supreme Will Realm experts or even Supreme Will Realm factions would refine such pills for the juniors they valued. Thinking of this, Zhou Fight could not help but sigh in his heart. Tianyang Wazu was indeed the descendant of regal Great Solar. His foundation and methods were indeed not something ordinary supreme gods could compare to. Even with his current foundation, he would probably only be able to refine 189 Saint Heaven and Earth pills at most. However, he did not have a pill formula, nor did he have an alchemist at the Supreme Will Realm. Without these two prerequisites, it was impossible to just have a large number of raw materials. At this thought, Zhou Fight's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 1734. Wushang vs. Tianyang Wazu. 2. Perhaps he could work with Tianyang Wazu. He had a lot of Supreme God materials with him. It would be a waste to keep them in his hands. He might as well use them to exchange for benefits and let the Sun Divine Court refine 189 Saint Heaven and Earth pills for him and his subordinates. This way, wouldn't he and his subordinates have another way to survive? This way, he could deal with some special situations when he could not use the previous resurrection method. Tianyang Wazu naturally did not know what Zhou Fight was thinking. Seeing that he was staring at him with a baffling look in his eyes, he immediately said angrily, "What are you looking at?" "I can't help but admire His Highness Tianyang for being so handsome and unconcerned about trifles, and daring to make sacrifices for great things." Zhou Fight's words were pleasant to hear. They would be working together in the future. He had to nurture his favorability in advance. The myriad worlds were not only about fighting and killing, but also about the ways of the world. Tianyang Wazu was stunned when he heard Zhou Fight's words. If Zhou Fight had said these words to him before killing the demon fetus, he would definitely feel that the other party was flattering him and wasting the two great titles of Common People's Regal and Supreme Lord Reserve Army. But now, the other party had the battle record of killing the demon fetus. This was something that even he might not be able to do. After being praised by such an expert, he actually felt a little smug. Even the cold gaze he used to look at Zhou Fight had become less sharp. He said in a deep voice, "You and I face a great enemy together. We should work together. 19 Saint Heaven and Earth pill is nothing. As long as you can take down Wushang, I'll give you one." Towards the end, he felt like he was gritting his teeth. All the injuries on his body were caused by the other party's punches and kicks. Every time he thought of it, he would always feel extremely humiliated. The corners of Zhou Fight's mouth twitched. Who needed a 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill? If he had hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or even more. How long are you going to catch up? Get up here and let me beat you to death. On the other side, seeing that the two of them had been chatting for so long, Wu Shang said unhappily. After he finished speaking, he looked at the will phantom of Yellow River's Wool and realized that the will phantom of Yellow River's Wool was also in a state of narrowing its eyes. He was immediately even more unhappy. However, he could only endure it. Shut up. After Tianyang Wazu ate the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill, his confidence seemed to have recovered a lot. He immediately glared and scolded back. Loser. Wu Shang smiled sinisterly and said, you're still not my match even if you recover all your states now. Let me give you a word of advice. Just quit, so you don't have to die again. You don't have a second pill, do you? Tianyang Wazu did not speak. Indeed, he did not possess a second 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill. He would really be unable to reverse the situation once he was beaten to death in the arena. But Regal Great Solar's pride didn't allow him to retreat. He sneered and actually rushed into the arena with 20 supreme gods to fight Wu Shang. Zhou Fight clicked his tongue and flew into the arena with the 20 supreme gods. However, he didn't join in immediately. Instead, he led his subordinates to silently observe from the side. The conceptual god's ability was indeed very troublesome. He wouldn't join in for no reason and waste his efforts before investigating the root cause of the other party's immortality. At the same time, divine sun bathing the heavens. Tianyang Wazu roared and rushed into the sky, turning into a small sun and star that emitted endless light and heat. At the same time, endless meteor showers flew out from the sun that he had transformed into. Then, they descended quickly like a rainstorm and attacked Wu Shang together. In the blink of an eye, Wu Shang was burned to a skeleton by countless meteor showers. His skeleton was abnormally strange. He didn't look like a human, but more like a pile of bones that had been temporarily piled up. However, such a pile of bones was now generating flesh and blood crazily. In less than a second, it returned to normal. Wu Shang did not care about his own pain or the endless meteor shower in the sky, as well as the light and heat. Under such an attack, he constantly regenerated his flesh and blood and was constantly on the verge of death. It was as if he didn't care about this at all. With a crazy expression, he held the 2 bone sabers and charged at Tianyang Wazu. Zhou Fight frowned slightly. His perception was extremely strong. Therefore, at first glance, he could tell that Wu Shang did not consume any energy from the outside world while his flesh and blood were constantly regenerating and he was seriously injured. This is against the law of conservation of energy. God spirits needed to consume external energy to complete the conversion of energy and matter if they wanted to create something out of thin air even with their cultivation system. And what was even more terrifying was, Zhou Fight could sense that the other party had not even officially activated his conceptual god power. He could complete such a ridiculous operation just by relying on some derivative and additional abilities of the conceptual god. Conceptual god system. This is unbelievable. Zhou Fight stroked his chin and thought. He even wanted to become a conceptual god now. The temptation of this unique extraordinary tier civilization was something that every cultivator and even god spirit could not resist. No wonder so many god spirits wanted to go to the illusionary world. Other than wanting to advance to a higher level, I also wanted to see the scenery outside his cultivation civilization. At this moment, Tianyang Wazu also saw that the other party's injuries were constantly recovering. His expression darkened but there was no surprise on his face. He had already experienced many of this fellow's methods. This is nothing. Heavenly Sun Sacred Flame Strike. Tianyang Wazu waved his right hand, and the small sun behind him suddenly shrunk countless times, turning into a palm-sized fiery red bead that floated in his hand. The bead was clearly very small, yet it was emitting a frightening might. Even the surrounding space was showing signs of cracking. Tianyang Wazu's scarlet hair danced wildly, and he had the temperament of a peerless supreme god. Zhou Fight was a little surprised. This was an arena space created by a Supreme Will Realm expert. The highest level could even accommodate Supreme Will Realm experts to fight. However, Tianyang Wazu could actually break the space here with his own methods? This Heavenly Sun Wu Shang was originally a quasi-Supreme Will Realm expert. Coupled with his foundation and inheritance from the Sun Divine Court, he actually had a faint aura of a Supreme Will Realm expert. Wu Shang! Taste the power of my Heavenly Sun Sacred Flame! Tianyang Wazu roared. Then, he saw the Heavenly Sun Sacred Bead in his hand suddenly release a scarlet fire pillar. The pillar of fire suddenly shot out and pounced at Wu Shang. Wu Shang's pupils constricted. He wanted to dodge, but he did not. Swoosh! Li was directly struck by the heavenly sun sacred flame. His entire body was buried in the dazzling flames of the heavenly sun sacred flame. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows slightly. Wu Shang's aura disappeared? Is he dead? Is it that simple? Tianyang Wazhu didn't look surprised at all. He stared at the spot where Wu Shang had been hit. After a while, a voice came from the fire. Hee hee. Interesting. But I'm unharmed. Ha 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 ha. A figure appeared from the flames amidst his wild laughter. He slowly walked out. It was Wu Shang. At that moment, the last burns on his body had completely recovered. It looked as if he had not experienced the heavenly sun sacred flame attack just now. That was an interesting move. Is there anything new? Wu Shang laughed brazenly. I'll satisfy you. Tianyang Wazhu's eyes were cold as he released more than 10 attacks that were comparable to a trace of the Supreme Will Realm. However, even though these attacks could leave Wu Shang without a corpse, after a while, he revived in one piece. It wasn't a bad move, either, but it was mediocre. I came back to life. Ha ha ha, I've been resurrected unscathed. Is this all the fifth prince of the Sun Divine Court can do? You did everything you could, and I didn't suffer a single injury. It's a little boring. I'm fine. If you don't do something special, I'm going to make a move. At the same time, after each attack, the protagonist of Tianyang Wazhu's eyes became filled with disbelief and finally despair. However, Zhou Fight seemed to have discovered something, and his eyes lit up. Chapter 1735. Killing Wu Shang. 1. Tianyang Wazhu looked at Wu Shang in a daze. Wu Shang was slowly walking towards him, his face bitter. It was the same again. He had clearly done his best, but the other party was able to face his attack unscathed, as if his attack was useless. It was not that he had never faced the illusionist clan. He had been to the Twilight battlefield a long time ago and watched the battle between the Supreme Will and the illusionist clan as the son of the regal Great Solar. He had personally experienced the Dusk battlefield for a period of time even after he became a supreme god. However, even though he had personally destroyed and seen many illusionist clan members, those illusionist clan members could not compare to the illusionist clan in front of him. There was no solution. He still didn't know how to deal with the other party after 2 all-out battles. His eyes were filled with confusion. What should he do now? He could only turn to look at Zhou Fight, seeing that Wu Shang was getting closer. Have you seen enough? He said helplessly. He had long known that Zhou Fight had already entered and was watching the battle from the side, but he didn't say anything. Firstly, it was because he did not want anyone else to interfere in his battle with Wu Shang. He wanted to personally kill the other party to protect his honor. Secondly, it was because he knew that Zhou Fight did not know Wu Shang's background. Since he had decided to join forces with Zhou Fight, he wanted to let Zhou Fight watch the battle from the side for a while and take the opportunity to understand this fellow's combat methods. Perhaps he could discover this fellow's weakness. It was absolutely impossible for him to defeat him now. It was time for this guy who had been watching the battle to come on stage. Enough, enough. Zhou Fight said with a smile, then his expression turned serious. Leave the rest of the battle to me. Okay. Be careful. Tianyang Wazhu nodded and retreated. Trying to run. How could Wu Shang let Tianyang Wazhu leave? This guy was the 5th direct descendant of regal Great Solar and had the potential to advance to the Supreme Will Realm in the future. He might even be able to ascend to the Supreme Throne of regal Great Solar. For a fellow with such potential, he naturally couldn't let him leave. However, right at this moment, Zhou Fight appeared in front of Wu Shang as if he had teleported. He smiled. Next. Your opponent is us. You. Wu Shang sneered and was about to rush over and kill Tianyang Wazhu, who was in a bad state. Zhou Fight shook his head. You still don't have much of a reputation. You are still looking down on this emperor like this even though this emperor has already killed a demon fetus. After saying that, he gently pushed out with his right hand. Quasi-Supreme Will Realm Law Skill. Myriad Method Star Palm. Rumble. An incomparably huge golden palm suddenly appeared on the entire arena. This golden palm seemed to be created by the heavens. Its style was simple and mysterious. There were complicated and profound law engravings on the surface and inside. At a glance, it was as if the laws of the entire myriad worlds were contained in this palm. Wu Shang's expression changed. He actually felt an extremely terrifying threat from this golden palm. It was as if he would definitely be severely injured if he underestimated the might from this palm strike. He wanted to dodge without thinking. However, the locking ability of the myriad method star palm was comparable to the locking ability of a supreme will realm expert with the enhancement of the endless laws. How could Wu Shang dodge it? Therefore, Wu Shang quickly realized with a dark expression that he could not dodge this palm at all. He took a deep breath. Not only did he not dodge, he even charged at the palm. He actually wanted to rely on his undying ability to break through Zhou Fight's attack head-on. Your attack can't hurt me, ha 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 ha. Wu Shang looked up at the sky and laughed. It's not over yet. Zhou Fight said calmly, don't jump to conclusions. After saying that, he slapped out again. Wu Shang's divine body had yet to completely recover. He was powerless to dodge with this palm strike and his divine body returned to its original state. He continued to reply. Zhou Fight continued to use the myriad method star palm. Wu Shang would definitely be left without a corpse with every palm strike. However, Wu Shang would definitely recover quickly from nothing after every palm strike, like a true immortal body in the legends. It's useless. Even though Wu Shang no longer had a body, his voice came from the void and laughed arrogantly. I'm the Undying King. No one can hurt me. Ha 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 ha. Zhou Fight's lips curled up. This further confirmed his guess. Right at that moment, Wu Shang suddenly mocked, don't think you'll be fine just because you keep pulling away. I'll let you see how you got the title of the King of Combat of Wu Shang. Wu Shang's figure suddenly disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. The next moment, he actually appeared out of thin air opposite Zhou Fight and punched the divine spark between Zhou Fight's eyebrows. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. He teleported and disappeared as he repelled the punch with the myriad method star palm. However, something unexpected happened to him and the other god spirits watching the battle. Just after Zhou Fight teleported, Wu Shang also teleported to the opposite side of Zhou Fight. Wu Shang looked at Zhou Fight in front of him and smiled sinisterly. He said with full fighting spirit. You can't get away with this. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. This was the second conceptual god ability. This fellow was indeed the main force fighting for the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. He had many methods indeed. The illusionist clan, which had multiple conceptual god abilities, was rare even in the entire illusionist clan. Chapter 1736. Killing Wu Shang. 2. He knew that it was useless no matter how he retreated. The other party's second conceptual god ability was clearly that no matter how the enemy avoided him, he would follow closely behind. As for the drawbacks, Zhou Fight could not tell yet. However, if this fellow felt that he was lacking in close combat, so he decided to attack him in close combat, he would have made the wrong choice. He grinned. He pointed a sword at the other party and said calmly. Do you know that this emperor has another title other than the common people's regal that few people know? You must die regardless of your title. Wu Shang said coldly with a ferocious expression. He threw countless punches at Zhou Fight after saying that. Due to the speed of these fists, they turned into countless fist-shaped phantoms. Every punch shattered the surrounding space of the arena. It was no exaggeration to say that the punches turned into countless fist-shaped phantoms due to the speed of these fists. Every punch shattered the surrounding space of the arena. However, Zhou Fight was not afraid. He even took the initiative to meet the other party and counterattacked every punch that Wu Shang threw. Wu Shang quickly discovered in shock. Not only did his close combat martial arts ability, which he was proud of, not cause great damage to the other party when he got close, but his fist even started to hurt because of the other party's strong counterattack. What is this guy's divine body made of? Is it done by a will holy artifact? Why is it so hard? Wu Shang was completely shocked. He had never seen such a powerful body among enemies of the same level. This is too ridiculous. Looking at Wu Shang's expression, Zhou Fight could guess what he was thinking. He chuckled calmly in his heart as he continuously defended and counterattacked. His supreme sacred body had already reached the grade 3 supreme god realm. This sacred body cultivation method from the eternal immortal realm inheritance was enough to resist the full strength attack of a low-level supreme will realm expert, even if it was only at the grade 3 supreme god realm now. If it could not even do this, how could it be considered a cultivation technique inherited by the eternal immortal realm? Previously, Zhou Fight was not too sure about his true combat strength. There were very few enemies that could make him go all out after all. However, he could probably figure out his current strength through the wushang in front of him now. With the invincible supreme sacred body, the invincible offensive myriad method star palm, and all the land in the world belongs to the king that could suppress strength, his defense, offensive, and domain abilities had already reached the low-level supreme will realm. Coupled with trump cards like the formless book and the innate sacred heart, even if he faced an upper-level supreme will realm expert, he would have a way to escape and save his life. In other words, he could already officially be considered a low-level supreme will realm combat power. And his true realm was only at the grade 3 supreme god realm. It was ridiculous to think about it for the other people. However, Zhou Fight felt that it was normal. That was because this was how his main body had risen through the ranks. Of course, he was still very happy. After confirming that he now had the combat strength of the supreme will realm, in other words, as long as he did not encounter the supreme will, Crimson Overlord, and the other willpower experts in this world, he would basically have no problem protecting himself. This sense of security was really maxed out. Speaking of which, Zhou Fight and Wushang had been fighting fiercely. If Zhou Fight was calm and relaxed, the more Wushang fought, the more shocked he became. The more he fought, the less confident he became. Why is this common people's regal so good at close combat? Wushang basically had no opponents who could defeat him in close combat in the illusionist clan, among the powerhouses below the supreme god level. There were only 2 or 3 opponents who were stronger than him, and even if there were 2 or 3, the difference in strength between them and him was not very big. He might be able to win 2 to 3 rounds while the other party would win 7 to 8 rounds if he fought 10 rounds. High melee combat skills and the conceptual godly ability of close combat. This was also why he called himself the King of Combat. However, even such a proud he could sense a huge difference from Zhou Fight in the short period of time he had fought him. He felt that he would be the winner of all 10 rounds if he fought against the common people's regal for 10 rounds. It was impossible even for them to tie. The difference in close combat strength was too great. It was so big that he did not even have the slightest confidence of winning. Bang! Zhou Fight first cut off Wushang's arm with a sword, then kicked him more than 10 light years away. Then, he gently stroked the divine sword in his hand and said calmly. This emperor's other title is Heavenly Martial God. Your so-called combat martial arts are useless in this emperor's eyes. You'd better honestly develop your conceptual god cultivation system in the future. A normal cultivation system like martial arts can't be integrated into your main body's conceptual divine extraordinary tier system. Studying this is just a waste of time. Who said that I need you to teach me? Wushang was furious and attacked even more fiercely. However, there was a huge difference in skill and strength. He was still no match for Zhou Fight no matter how much strength he erupted with. Often, he would have already died 7 to 8 times before he could cause any harm to Zhou Fight. He would have long died at Zhou Fight's hands if he didn't have infinite rebirth. Wushang also realized that if this continued, even if he had an indestructible body, it was impossible for him to defeat Zhou Fight and obtain the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. Therefore, he directly retreated and stared at Zhou Fight from afar after he fought Zhou Zhan a few more times. Supreme Will Realm. A mere grade 3 Supreme God Realm like you actually has the combat strength of the Supreme Will Realm. Even the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and God King Heaven Punishment only have Supreme Will Realm combat strength when they are at the Quasi-Supreme Will Realm and grade 4 Supreme God Realm. You actually have the combat strength of the Supreme Will Realm so early. No wonder. You can obtain the last spot for the Yellow River's will inheritance. At this point, he suddenly laughed in a low voice. He 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 he. I can't take this lying down. I wasn't going to use this trick. You forced my hand. Boom 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 boom. 100 myriad method star palms suddenly erupted and hit Wushang in the blink of an eye. You want to stop me from using my trump card? No way. I can live forever. You can't kill me. Wushang laughed arrogantly. He looked at Zhou Fight, wanting to see even a trace of panic and worry on his face. However, his hopes were dashed. Zhou Fight looked calm, as if he did not care about Wushang's methods at all. The next second, just as Wushang was about to revive under the attack of the myriad method star palm, Zhou Fight suddenly activated the all the land in the world belongs to the king domain and included Wushang in it. Then, he casually set a rule in the domain that the enemy could not speak. Wushang realized that he could not speak and immediately panicked very visibly. At the same time, his flesh and blood stopped regenerating. It was as if his undying ability had failed. Tianyang Huazu and his subordinates widened their eyes when they saw this scene. The conceptual god power of his is no longer effective. Prime Minister Wu said in shock. What a fatal weakness. Zhou Feit slowly walked in front of him and looked at him with a faint smile. Your first conceptual god ability will lose its effect as long as you can't say things like rebirth, resurrection, or injury. This emperor is right, right. Wu Shang's divine body stiffened. Seeing this, Zhou Feit shook his head and said something that broke Wu Shang's defense the most. You're even simpler than that demon fetus after knowing the weakness of your conceptual god power. After saying that, he slapped Wu Shang as he secretly activated the power of the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal to augment his palm. Wu Shang died on the spot and he did not revive again. The common people's regal's victory. Outside the arena, the Phantom of Yellow River's Wool smiled faintly and looked at Zhou Feit with deep admiration. Chapter 1737. Secret of the Supreme Will Realm. 1. Rumble. The faint yellow light barrier that enveloped the entire arena dissipated, leaving only Zhou Feit, Tianyang Huazu, and the 20 supreme gods under them. As for the 20 scarlet supreme gods under Wu Shang, they had long been killed by Zhou Feit and the supreme gods under Tianyang Huazu before the battle ended. They saw the other supreme gods of the illusionist clan under Wu Shang running outside as soon as they emerged. Obviously, they saw their master's death and knew that they would never be able to escape if they did not run now. However, Zhou Feit and Tianyang Huazu naturally could not let these remnants of the illusionist clan escape. Zhou Feit personally took action. A palm strike. The myriad method star palm flew out with an earth-shattering aura and attacked the remaining supreme gods of the illusionist clan. This myriad method star palm transformed into hundreds of smaller myriad method star palms that went straight for every supreme god of the illusionist clan while flying. In the blink of an eye, the remaining supreme gods of the illusionist clan were all killed by Zhou Feit's palm. When Tianyang Huazu saw this scene, he understood the power of Zhou Feit's almost casual palm strike. He couldn't help but take a deep breath as a thought naturally appeared in his mind. Supreme Will Realm. This was the Supreme Lord's fourth reserve army that he had looked down on at the beginning, but his impression of him had changed. He actually had true Supreme Will Realm combat strength now. Even if it was only low-level Supreme Will Realm combat strength, it was extremely terrifying. In the entire Supreme Great Cosmos, there were only more than 50 Supreme Will Realm experts, on the surface and in secret. There were only more than 200 people who were not at the Supreme Will Realm but had the strength of the Supreme Will Realm for various reasons. In other words, the common people's regal in front of him, the Supreme Lord's Fourth Reserve Army, could already be ranked in the top 300 in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos in terms of combat strength. This had already officially advanced to the level of a top expert of the Supreme Great Cosmos. The most terrifying thing was, this common people's regal was only a Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. A Grade 3 Supreme God Realm actually had the strength of a low-level Supreme Will Realm. This is too ridiculous. Even the top geniuses of the Supreme Great Cosmos, God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. These two divine heroes were not as terrifying as this common people's regal at the same level. Could it be that the Supreme Great Cosmos had welcomed a genius expert who was even more terrifying than God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord? A thought that even he did not dare to believe appeared in Tianyang Huazu's mind. Those were the God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. In front of these two, not to mention him, even the older father, Regal Great Solar, and Regal Great Lunar, who were of the same level as him, had to treat him with respect. In front of those two, he was simply a little Karami. However, now that he saw the power of the common people's regal, he felt that this common people's regal's potential was even higher than those two. This thought shocked himself. He didn't dare to think too much. At this moment, the voice of Yellow River's Wool finally sounded. Common people's regal. His voice was dignified and distant, but it carried a faint gentleness and gratification. I'm here. Zhou Feit said respectfully. You have defeated Wu Shang and are qualified to accept my inheritance. Are you ready? Zhou Feit nodded and said, I'm ready. The Yellow River's Wool nodded and looked at the still stunned Tianyang Huazu. Your Majesty Tianyang Huazu. Your performance in the battle with Wu Shang was not bad either. Among the many descendants of Regal Great Solar, be it combat strength or potential, you can be ranked above average. These three treasures, Blue Yang Jade, Mystic Origin Pill, and Myriad Light Deo Protector Flower are your rewards. After saying that, 3 treasures flew out from the glabella of the Yellow River's will and flew in front of Tianyang Huazhu. Junior thanks Lord Yellow River's will. Tianyang Huazhu roared. He originally thought that this training would be fruitless. In fact, he felt that he might lose his life on this trip after seeing Wu Shang's strength. He did not expect that he would be able to obtain a few treasures. As for the powerful Wu Shang, he did not obtain anything and even died here. Then, he looked up and received the 3 treasures. The smile on his face increased when his willpower came into contact with the 3 treasures. This was because he suddenly discovered that these 3 treasures were all low-level Supreme Will Realm treasures. Even though they were only materials and not will holy artifacts, they were still very precious. He did not have many treasures of this level after advancing to the Supreme Will Realm even if he was a direct descendant of Regal Great Solar. You're dismissed now that you've received your reward. The Will of Yellow River said. Yes. Tianyang Huazhu also knew that it was not convenient for him to be at the scene at this time, so he hurriedly said respectfully, I'll take my leave now. After saying that, he suddenly sent a voice transmission to Zhou Fight. Your Excellency, Common People's Regal. Will Your Excellency have time to talk to me after Your Excellency receives the inheritance and legacy of the Will of Yellow River? I, Tianyang Huazhu, admire Your Excellency Common People's Regal for killing the powerhouses of the illusionist clan. I also want to give you some gifts. Zhou Fight was speechless. Chapter 1738. Secret of the Supreme Will Realm. 2. Wasn't this prince still arrogant before the competition for the inheritance? His transition was unexpectedly smooth. He had a bright future. Zhou Fight praised in his heart and agreed to the other party's request. It would be a waste not to accept a gift that came knocking on your door. Besides, he had business to discuss with the other party, so he could talk about it together. When Tianyang Huazhu heard that Zhou Fight had agreed to his request, his face immediately lit up. At this point, he did not waste any more time and immediately left the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will. At this point, only the will phantoms of Zhou Fight and Yellow River's will were left in this land of inheritance. Common People's Regal. The will phantom of Yellow River's will smiled and said, You can also say that it's the 3rd Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord. You and I are old acquaintances. Zhou Fight could not help but raise his eyebrows. He probed, Why do you say that, Your Excellency? This should be the first time I've met Your Excellency, right? Oh? Is this the first time we've met? The Yellow River's will chuckled. You've seen me more than once in the Time Ruins, right? Your Excellency actually knows about the Time Ruins. Zhou Fight said in shock. He really did not expect that the will of Yellow River would even know about the Time Ruins. Yellow River's will nodded and said. You're not at the Supreme Will Realm, so you don't know the profundity of this realm. An existence at this realm has completely broken away from the upper limit of the God Spirit and reached an unbelievable realm. Existences at the Supreme Will Realm like us can already rely on our wills to interfere with the other timelines and even absorb them from the other timelines to restrain them to increase their strength realm. It's also because of this ability that Supreme Will Realm existences basically have the ability to deduce and divine. I once sensed the will of the Yellow River in the ruins of time you're managing. It's just that this main body is too far away and it's not very useful for me to absorb it, so after I roughly knew some information, I stopped caring. I didn't expect it to be mentioned again. The Yellow River's will sighed. Zhou Fight clicked his tongue in wonder. Even though he now had a few Supreme Will Realm inheritances, the Willpower inheritance even had an incomplete Eternal Immortal Realm inheritance like the Supreme Sacred Body. However, he knew the principle that going overboard was as bad as falling short. Therefore, up until now, there were not many realm secrets about the Supreme Will Realm and the Will Realm. He only understood the cultivation content of the Supreme God Realm and the related breakthrough content of how to break through to the Supreme Will Realm. He knew a little about other things, but not much. Therefore, Zhou Fight found what the Will Phantom of Yellow River said very novel. At the same time, he was greatly shocked. It turned out that the Supreme Will Realm could already interfere with the timeline. They could even absorb themselves in other timelines and restrain them to increase their strength realm. This was unbelievable. The other timelines should be similar to a parallel universe, right? To be able to achieve such an ability was really unbelievable. However, they could do similar things when one cultivated the space-time laws to an extremely high level. However, they could at most summon their projections in other timelines to come to their timelines to fight for them, or predict and understand some relevant information about the future in advance, but most of them were not very accurate. There was a possibility that something could happen in one timeline in the future after all. It was very likely that it had never happened in another timeline. There was not even a sign of it happening. That's why the predictions are off. Other than that, the god spirits of law of space-time could not do anything else. It was impossible to compare to a supreme will realm expert forcefully interfering with the other timelines and even absorbing himself from the other timelines to increase his strength. At this thought, Zhou Fight asked curiously. Forgive me for my offense, but since your excellency can interfere with the timeline, can't you resolve your crisis in advance and let your excellency live? Brother Soul Heaven has always missed you. And when I came, I met Uncle too. He also misses Lord Yellow River's will very much. The will of Yellow River shook its head when it heard this. It's precisely because we saw countless timelines about ourselves that we saw countless possibilities. This might be the future I'm waiting for. What choice do you think I should make? Like the fall of my timeline, I saw no less than hundreds of millions of possibilities in other timelines. I also saw more timelines. I've been safe and sound until now. Tell me, which one should I believe? Zhou Fight fell silent. So that was how it was. In that case, even if a Supreme Will Realm expert could see the endless timeline that belonged to them, because there were too many choices, there might be too many. In this situation, they were no different from mortals. It was not much different from not seeing them. Trust yourself. Zhou Fight asked. A smile appeared on the face of the Yellow River's will when it heard this. Then, it sighed and said, yes, you can only believe in yourself. Then, this person in the Supreme Will Realm stopped talking. This was because the will of Yellow River in front of him had already killed him because it believed in him. Regarding this, Zhou Fight could only comment that this Yellow River's will was really unlucky. In order to change the topic, Zhou Fight asked, if the Supreme Will Realm can interfere with the timeline and absorb the self in the other timelines, what about the will? It's hard to say whether it's difficult or not. As long as the Supreme Will Realm absorbs all myself in the timeline and transforms myself into one, I can advance to the Supreme Will Realm. However, this step seems simple, but it's actually filled with danger. Yellow River's will did not seem to be in a hurry to hand over the inheritance to Zhou Fight, so he simply told him everything he knew about realms. There is no need to mention the threat of external enemies, but the real threat comes from itself. To be precise, it's my own self from another timeline. My other self in the timeline. Zhou Zhou was shocked. That's right. The will of Yellow River nodded slightly. When you just enter the Supreme Will Realm and begin to absorb your other self in the other timelines to increase your strength, your other self in the other timelines will come to this time to deal with you under the coercion of fate. It's fine when it's median and below. Most of these otherworldly bodies who came to deal with you are relatively weak. You can easily deal with them. However, when you advance to the upper-level Supreme Will Realm or absorb more than half of your timeline, the remaining you in the timeline will be bestowed with powerful power by fate. Under the enhancement of these powers, these otherworldly bodies are already comparable to or even surpassing you. At that time, once the two sides collide, whether you win or lose, life or death, it's uncertain. When the Yellow River's will said this, its expression was very solemn. Zhou Fight frowned when he heard that. The cultivation of the Supreme Will Realm was actually so different? Killing him to complete the advancement of his strength? Then, Your Excellency, who were you when you were alive? Zhou Fight stopped thinking and asked. In the cultivation of the Supreme Will Realm, it's easier for the low level and middle level. Therefore, I spent hundreds of thousands of years to break through and advance to the upper level Supreme Will Realm. The Yellow River's will said. Hundreds of thousands of years? The corners of Zhou Fight's mouth twitched. He had been cultivating for less than a year. The will of Yellow River told Zhou Fight more, seeing that he was interested in general cultivation knowledge in this aspect. He could tell that Zhou Fight had cultivated for a short period of time and was already a grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert. He could also unleash the combat strength of a Supreme Will Realm expert in advance. Coupled with the help of the Supreme Will Realm, he felt that he was almost certain to advance to the Supreme Will Realm in the future. Therefore, he was not afraid that saying this would affect his future advancement. Zhou Fight listened happily. The will of Yellow River only stopped talking after a long while. That's all for now. If you have any questions in the future, you can directly understand them from the inheritance I gave you, or you can directly go to the ruins of time and ask the former me. He probably won't reject you. I'll be the one to give you my heritage and inheritance. The Yellow River's will said. Chapter 1739. Will Holy Artifact and Yellow River Treasure Vault. Okay. Zhou Fight nodded. He had been waiting for this moment. Yellow River's will did not say much. He saw two items appear in front of him with a thought. They were the Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Stone Slab that had opened the door previously. You should already know the effect of the Yellow River Emperor Sword. As for the effect of the Yellow River Slab, it's mainly about being the carrier of my legacy. In the future, you will be the ruler of the Yellow River region. I'll leave these two will holy artifacts to you. After the will of Yellow River finished speaking, the two will holy artifacts flew towards Zhou Fight and quickly arrived in front of him. Zhou Fight had already seen the attributes of the Yellow River Emperor Sword, so his gaze landed on the Yellow River Stone Slab. It turned out that this Yellow River Slate was mainly the inheritance vessel of the Yellow River's will. No wonder he had never heard of the effects of the Yellow River Slate. Zhou Fight thought and looked over. Information about the holy artifact appeared. Holy artifact name, Yellow River Stone Slab. Holy artifact grade, high level will holy artifact. Holy artifact will 1. Power of the Yellow River, a portion of the power of the Yellow River will is stored in the Yellow River Stone Slab. It can be used to deal with most experts below the Supreme Will realm. However, this power will decrease as the number of times it is used, and it will finally be completely exhausted. Holy Artifact Will 2 Yellow River Will Inheritance. The Yellow River Slab contains the inheritance of the will of the Yellow River. The successor recognized by the will of the Yellow River will obtain this inheritance and walk the path of the Supreme Will realm. Living beings who have not been recognized by the will of the Yellow River will not be able to see the information of this will skill. Holy Artifact Will 3. Heart of the Yellow River. The Yellow River Slab is the origin treasure of the Yellow River realm. Living beings with the Yellow River Slab can greatly increase their relevant comprehension when cultivating the related nomological path and will path of the Yellow River. When they encounter a bottleneck, it's easier for them to develop cultivation inspiration and break through the bottleneck to advance to a higher level. Holy Artifact Will 4. Yellow River Water Refinement. The Yellow River Slate is soaked in the water of the Yellow River and possesses the power of the water of the Yellow River. The owner can use this power to sharpen their will and greatly increase the efficiency of their willpower. The highest level of willpower can be raised to the upper Supreme Will realm. Holy Artifact Will 5. Key to the Yellow River. Part 2. The Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Slab are the two keys to opening the inheritance of the Yellow River Will. With them, you will have a chance to open the inheritance of the Yellow River Will in the future and obtain all the inheritance of the Yellow River Will. Prompt: requires willpower to recognize a master. Zhou Fight's eyes lit up. The greatest use of this Yellow River Slate was naturally the inheritance of the Yellow River's will inside it. However, he did not expect that this will holy artifact was actually the same as the Holy Scripture of the Heart. It was a supplementary cultivation type holy artifact of the will holy artifact level. Furthermore, the Holy Scripture of the Heart was only a low-level will holy artifact. This Yellow River Stone Slab was a true upper-level will holy artifact. The difference between the two was huge. One Yellow River Slate was equivalent to 10 Holy Scripture of the Hearts. This was the huge difference between a low level and a high level. It was just like the huge difference in strength between a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert and an upper Supreme Will Realm expert. In addition, the effect of the Heart of Yellow River on this Yellow River Slate was also very useful. Even though he had already confirmed his path and would not take the path of the Yellow River's will, but using the effect of the Heart of Yellow River to assist him in comprehending the inheritance of the Yellow River's will to provide a reference for his future path was indeed a very good method. With the effect of this Heart of Yellow River, he would be able to advance to the Supreme Will realm faster in the future when he comprehended the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. Even at the Supreme Will realm, he would be able to greatly increase his cultivation speed. Only when he advanced to the upper Supreme Will realm would the effect of the Heart of Yellow River be useless to him. However, when the time came, he could completely pass it on to his subordinates and it could still be of great use. Finally, it was also something that Zhou Fight valued. Furthermore, it was second only to the effect of inheriting the legacy. The power of the Yellow River. With the power of the Yellow River, he had another Supreme Will Realm technique. In the future, even if he faced an upper-level Supreme Will Realm expert, he would not have to be too afraid. It is still okay as long as it worked even though there were limitations to the number of times it could be used. If it's gone, it means it's useful to me. Zhou Fight might feel a little regretful that he had not used it. Thank you, Lord Yellow River, for bestowing me with the inheritance. Zhou Fight first said this respectfully to the will phantom of Yellow River's will before putting away the two will holy artifacts with respect. He felt a little emotional. In the past, with the 100% drop rate / king of loot / heavenly fate de Huang and other income type lord talents, he had never lacked weapons and equipment. He had always been used to being self-sufficient. However, at this level, the products of the lord talent could no longer keep up with his development. He had to find treasures to strengthen himself. For example, the Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Stone Slab. However, Zhou Fight did not feel that it was a pity. Firstly, he already had the subsequent inheritance of the Supreme Sacred Body. As long as he cultivated the Supreme Sacred Body to the Supreme Will Realm, he could continuously produce will holy artifacts wholesale. There would be no shortage at all. At that time, it would not be a problem to give every Supreme Will Realm expert in the Supreme Great Cosmos a set of will holy artifacts. Chapter 1740. Will Holy Artifact and Yellow River Treasure Vault. 2. Thirdly, he couldn't delay his growth just to equip himself with weapons. Wouldn't that be neglecting the essentials? Even though the current situation was a little regretful, it was actually the outcome he wanted. However, he didn't think too much about it. That was because at this moment, the will of Yellow River spoke again. Actually, you should lead your subordinates to completely expel the illusionist clan from the Yellow River region before I hand over my inheritance to you under normal circumstances. However, since you're the successor of the Supreme Will, then forget it. The will of Yellow River smiled faintly. This rule was set when he had just died. At that time, he was filled with hatred for the illusionist clan and guilt for letting down the expectations of the Supreme Will. Therefore, it was stipulated that if they wanted to obtain his inheritance, they had to chase the illusionist clan out of the Yellow River to obtain his inheritance. However, now that things had come to this, he had seen through a lot and let go of a lot. In addition, Zhou Fight was the inheritor of the Supreme Will and had infinite potential, so he decided not to make these restrictions. It could also be considered to make up for the guilt he felt towards the Supreme Will. I see. Zhou Fight thought to himself. No wonder the will of the Yellow River handed this inheritance to him before he could chase the enemies of the illusionist clan out. He was overjoyed. It was naturally a good thing to be able to obtain the inheritance of a top Supreme Will Realm expert without paying much. It would be a little difficult for him to chase the illusionist clan out of the Yellow River Realm now. There was more than one Supreme Will Realm expert in the illusionist clan in the Yellow River Realm after all. Even though he now had some Supreme Will Realm methods, it was not to the extent of being able to crush them. When he reached the quasi-Supreme Will Realm, perhaps he could lead his subordinates to completely chase them away and return the Yellow River to a pure land. It was still a long way off. In addition to my inheritance and holy artifacts, there are also some of my inheritances. You'll be the Lord of the Yellow River Realm in the future. Even though this title doesn't live up to its name, you should take these things. I hope you can break through early in the future and reach the Supreme Will Realm. Expel these enemies from the other world as soon as possible and become the true ruler of the Yellow River Realm. The will of Yellow River said. Yes, Your Excellency. I will definitely destroy the illusionist clan in this Yellow River region. Zhou Fight said respectfully. The will of Yellow River could not help but be speechless. He just wanted this successor of the Supreme Will to be expelled from the illusionist clan one day. And he actually wanted to completely destroy the illusionist clan in the realm under his feet. The Yellow River's will could not help but sigh. As expected of the successor personally chosen by the Supreme Will. He had potential, strength, courage, and ambition. How could such a successor not satisfy the Supreme Will? Even the will of Yellow River was a little envious. Why didn't he have such a successor when he was alive? If he had such a successor, perhaps he would not have died in the ambush of the illusionary race in such a hurry back then. Or even if he died, the Yellow River region would have a successor to maintain the overall situation and would not have ended up like this. The more he thought about it, the more he sighed in his heart. Then, he quickly threw away these useless emotions and sighs and continued, these are my inheritance. There are also some treasures inside that are more useful to you. I hope I can help you in the future. After saying that, a faint yellow treasure vault appeared out of thin air. This treasure vault was extremely huge. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as indomitable. In front of it was a majestic yellow door with 4 ancient words written on it. The Yellow River Treasure Vault. Zhou Fight flew over curiously and reached out to touch the door of the treasure vault. The next moment, his will was sucked in. Inside the Yellow River treasure vault, Zhou Fight looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. The scene in front of him was a vast starry sky. In this starry sky, there were countless planets, and every planet was filled with treasures. From legendary tier treasures to supreme will realm treasures. Defense, attack, healing, dispelling curses, medicine, building materials, blueprints, puppets, spaceships, talismans, legacies, divine artifacts, holy artifacts. There were all kinds of treasures and even supreme treasures. How powerful was Zhou Fight's perception! However, he couldn't determine how many treasures there were in a short period of time even with his perception. He only knew that the number 1 treasure vault that he was so proud of had to admit defeat in front of this treasury. Even though there were not as many divine artifacts as in his number 1 treasure vault, they had 10 times or more treasures than him other than divine artifacts. Ridiculous. It is too ridiculous. Zhou Fight was shocked. This was the first time he had come into contact with the foundation of a supreme will realm existence. He realized that he had underestimated the ability of a supreme will realm expert to amass wealth with this contact. Especially the wealth accumulation ability of a high-level supreme will realm expert like the Yellow River's will. It was no exaggeration to say that these treasures could establish at least 100 blazing sun divine kingdoms, not including divine artifacts, excluding the divine artifacts he had. Shocking! The will of Yellow River chuckled and said, "These are considered quite little. Unfortunately, I didn't want to go out and plunder other alternate universes anymore for various reasons. From then on, my wealth only dwindled. My wealth kept decreasing, and in the end, this is all that is left. What you see is actually less than 1% of what I had at the height of my wealth. I don't like going out. In my life, I've only gone out twice and plundered 2 alternate universes without the protection of willpower experts. At that time, it was the peak of my accumulated wealth. Unfortunately, I didn't want to go out and plunder other alternate universes anymore for various reasons. From then on, my wealth only dwindled. My wealth kept decreasing, and in the end, this is all that is left. What you see is actually less than 1% of what I had at the height of my wealth." The will of Yellow River smiled faintly. Like those supreme willpower experts who often go out to the ultimate void great cosmos and plunder those otherworldly great cosmoses without the protection of willpower. Their wealth far exceeds mine by 10 times or even more. The ultimate void great cosmos is simply like a treasure vault for men of strong will. Other than eternal immortal realm treasures, they can have anything they want. Zhou Zhou's eyes lit up. It turned out that a supreme will realm expert would actually go to the ultimate void great cosmos to plunder other alternate universes without the protection of willpower experts. No wonder the wealth of the Yellow River's will was so shocking. If he relied on plundering the wealth in the supreme great cosmos, he would probably have to cause a commotion in the myriad worlds to accumulate it. However, it was different in the ultimate void great cosmos. The ultimate void great cosmos was truly boundless and contained endless wealth. It's a piece of cake to get this kind of wealth. The will of Yellow River also noticed the interested expression on Zhou Fight's face. He smiled and said, "If you're interested, you can also plunder or even directly occupy them after you advance to the Supreme Will Realm. You walk the path of a lord. You'll have to take this step sooner or later. Don't feel burdened. The ultimate void great cosmos is like this. If you don't plunder them and occupy their universe, when they grows up, they will turn around and attack you for no reason. In a place like the ultimate void great cosmos, only experts who suppressed everything could survive. Even in our supreme great cosmos and the crimson great cosmos, with the protection of the supreme will and the crimson overlord, we have been invaded more than 31 times in the history of our great cosmos. If not for the supreme will and the crimson overlord gradually making a name for themselves and making the other great cosmoses not dare to do it again, our great cosmos might have already become a colonial universe of the other great cosmoses. How would you have the chance to rise?" The will of Yellow River instructed. The common people's regal would be the successor of the supreme will in the future. He felt that it was necessary for him to tell him the truth about the ultimate void great cosmos in advance, lest he had some naive thoughts about the ultimate void great cosmos. "I understand. Thank you for your guidance, Your Excellency," the will of Yellow River. Zhou Fight nodded seriously. In fact, he had long been mentally prepared for this. Otherwise, he would not have sent his clone to another lord's great cosmos in advance to prepare to plunder the lord's resources of them. However, the Yellow River's will was also kindly reminding him, so he naturally would not say anything unnecessary. The will of Yellow River nodded slightly. He could tell that Zhou Fight was listening. Right at that moment, he saw some hesitation on Zhou Fight's face. The Yellow Rivers Will smiled and asked. Common people's regal, if you have anything to say, just ask. You and I can be considered master and disciple. There's no need to be so formal. Chapter 1741. Death Whisperers Fall. 1. Zhou Fight asked bluntly. Teacher Yellow River, what would you do if I wasn't here today and your inheritance was taken by the illusionist clan? So that's what this is about. The Will of Yellow River smiled. I was killed by the illusionist clan. How could I let the illusionist clan get my inheritance in the end? I will probably be revived from anger even if I was dead. Don't worry. Even if you weren't there and allowed the illusionist clan to obtain my inheritance also had the secret technique of reincarnation that I left behind. This secret reincarnation technique won't work on the living beings of the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos, but once the living beings of the illusionist clan see it, they will immediately trigger the effect of this secret reincarnation technique. The living beings under the secret technique of reincarnation will immediately enter the reincarnation cycle and change their bloodline identities. When he comes out of the reincarnation cycle, he will realize that he has already lost his identity as a member of the illusionist clan and become a living being of our Supreme Great Cosmos. I see. Zhou Fight was enlightened. No wonder the Will of the Yellow River was so assured to let the illusionist clan fight for the inheritance left behind by him. It turned out that he had left behind a backup plan. He clicked his tongue in wonder. He did not expect the Will of Yellow River to have such a secret technique. It could actually turn the people of the illusionary race into living beings of the Supreme Great Cosmos? Tisk. It shouldn't be able to be promoted on a large scale. Otherwise, this secret technique would have become a powerful weapon against the illusionary race. Then, he specially asked the Will of Yellow River. Indeed, he knew that this mystic technique could not be used by other experts. This was because this secret skill was a willpower skill of the Yellow River's will. Only supreme willpower experts who walked the Yellow River path or the reincarnation path could use this willpower skill. Moreover, this willpower skill could only be used on one life form at most. It could not be used on a large-scale enemy at all. Moreover, it would take a long time for it to be used again. Due to various restrictions, the Will of Yellow River did not promote this secret technique. If you are interested, there are records of this secret technique in the Yellow River Treasure Vault. Learn it if you want. The Will of Yellow River told Zhou Fight, seeing his interested expression. Yes, teacher. The Will of Yellow River smiled. It felt good to be able to take in such a disciple after death. As for whether it would cause a misunderstanding with the Supreme Will, he didn't care. It was impossible for every expert to have one teacher after all. It was very normal for a powerhouse who had lived for countless years to have a large number of teachers guiding his growth in his life. Only one teacher would be weird. Besides, he had already perished. There's nothing to care about. Common people's regal. Yellow River's Will said. He smiled and looked at Zhou Fight, his eyes full of warmth. I'm leaving. You'll have to take care throughout the rest of your life. Do not fail the Supreme Will's expectations of you. But come to think of it, you've actually done a good job. I don't think I need to put any more pressure on your shoulders. After saying that, the Will Phantom of Yellow River's Will gradually became transparent. When Zhou Fight saw this, he felt a little suffocated. He suddenly thought of something and hurriedly raised the Yellow River Emperor's sword and asked. Your Excellency, Yellow River's Will, can this Yellow River Emperor's sword revive you? Isn't it the highest level that can revive an upper-level Supreme Will Realm expert? Can't do it. The Will of Yellow River smiled and shook his head. The attack methods of the illusionary race are different from the methods of our ultimate Void Great Cosmos. Even the Yellow River Emperor's sword can't crack their methods. If I'm a mid-level Supreme Will Realm expert, the Yellow River Emperor's sword might be able to revive me. However, I'm a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. I'm on the same level as the Yellow River Emperor's sword. The Yellow River Emperor's sword can't save me. Zhou Fight fell silent. The Will Phantom of Yellow River's Will was about to completely dissipate. Zhou Fight took a deep breath and shouted to the Will of Yellow River, I will definitely become the Supreme Lord. Furthermore, I will surpass the Supreme Will and become an Eternal Realm expert. The Will of Yellow River smiled. His face was full of affirmation. If he had been alive, he wouldn't have said anything when he heard someone else say such words. Even if he was God King Heaven Punishment, he wouldn't have thought highly of him on the surface. However, now that he was about to leave completely, he believed that the future that the other party mentioned might be realized. A man's words are kind when he is about to die. Gods are no different. The Yellow River's will had fallen. He had completely fallen. Zhou Fight was standing on the spot, feeling melancholic. Right at that moment, he suddenly realized that there seemed to be something on the ground where the Yellow River's will had perished. Zhou Fight flew over to pick it up and looked at it. It turned out to be 2 letters. Zhou Fight nodded. He looked at the surface. One was for the reincarnation will. The other was for Uncle Tu. Zhou Fight took a few glances and naturally did not read the contents of the letter. He kept it and prepared to send it to Uncle Tu and the reincarnation will later. But just as he was about to leave, rumble! The entire Yellow River land of inheritance suddenly shook violently, as if an earthquake had happened. However, how could there be an earthquake in a place like the Yellow River realm that could be said to be the divine world? Experts are fighting. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows and his expression turned serious. Only a Supreme Will Realm expert could cause such a shocking commotion in the Yellow River domain. Chapter 1742. Death Whisperers Fall. 2. In other words, a Supreme Will Realm expert was fighting in the Yellow River region. His expression sank as he immediately flew out. As soon as he flew out, Zhou Fight saw Tianyang Huazhu and his subordinates. Your Excellency Common People's Regal. Tianyang Huazhu shouted. Let's hide in the Yellow River's land of inheritance. It's safe. With that, Zhou Fight flew straight to the center of the battle. Tianyang Huazhu looked worried when he saw Zhou Fight fly over. That intense battle fluctuation should be a battle between Supreme Will Realm experts. Even though Common People's Regal has just obtained the inheritance of Lord Yellow River's will, he is still not a true Supreme Will Realm expert. Will it be dangerous for him to charge forward now? Prime Minister Wu, who was behind him, could not help but feel emotional when he saw this. How long had it been? His Highness had gone from looking down on the other party to worrying about the other party's safety. Common People's Regal's martial strength and charisma weren't just for show. Rest assured, Your Highness. I see that Your Excellency Common People's Regal has always been known for his foresight and wisdom. He is a person who cares a lot about his own life. He will never do anything rash. Since he dares to go, he must have the confidence. We'll just have to wait and see. Prime Minister Wu said respectfully. Tianyang Huazhu could only nod. On the other side, after continuous teleportation, Zhou Fight finally arrived at the scene of the battle. Perhaps because he had sensed the fluctuations of the battle between Supreme Will Realm experts, the Yellow River Emperor sword in his hand automatically split into an origin sword aura that coiled around Zhou Fight. Zhou Fight looked at the origin sword chi and patted the Yellow River sword chi with a smile. It was no exaggeration to say that with just this origin sword aura, even low-level Supreme Will Realm experts could not approach him. The only pity was that he could only barely control this will holy artifact with the help of King. It wouldn't be long before he had to put it down. Now, this origin sword chi was automatically used by the spirit of the Yellow River Emperor sword to protect its master. Then, Zhou Fight calmly looked forward. In the dusky yellow sea of clouds ahead, 2 indomitable giants were fighting each other. One of them held a high-level will holy artifact. 9 Nether Reincarnation Sacred Spear. As he stabbed, and smashed, every move was crazy and revealed a bloodthirsty killing intent. This killing intent and spearmanship made the world tremble, and the entire Yellow River region was faintly afraid of this power. It was the reincarnation will. The other existence wore a black cloak, and his entire body was shrouded in death and darkness. He held an ancient black staff, and he used all kinds of forbidden spells. In this battle method, the reincarnation will should have the upper hand, but the other party was actually suppressing the reincarnation will with endless forbidden techniques. Who's this guy? Zhou Fight hid his figure and asked solemnly as he took out the Bodhi Supreme. A chance to answer an official question. Bodhi Supreme also looked solemn. This guy is the commander-in-chief of the Yellow River region of the Illusionist clan. He is the Illusionist clan with the highest status in the Yellow River region. His legendary name is Death Whisperer. As far as I know, he has the conceptual power to see and control the death of life forms. You can even kill a god spirit with a single word. What he likes to do the most is to whisper in the ear of a life form about the other party's future death. Then you watch each other struggle between life and death, and finally have to accept the tragedy of your fate. As for his conceptual weakness, it's not clear at the moment. Death Whisperer. Zhou Fight muttered the name. It was quite intimidating. He observed carefully and realized that this fellow was definitely extremely strong. He was probably not weaker than the will of Yellow River, or even above it. The will of Yellow River was killed by him. Bodhi Supreme reminded. Zhou Zhou was shocked. Then, he looked at the crazy reincarnation will and finally understood why Soul Heaven was so crazy. He had seen his enemy. He gripped the Yellow River Emperor sword in his hand tightly as a cold glint appeared in his eyes. Now that he had accepted the inheritance of Yellow River's will, in this aspect, this guy was also his enemy. I wonder if I can help? Right at that moment, a wild and unrestrained laughter rang out. Ha 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 ha. The reincarnation will. You're only a small newly advanced Supreme Will Realm expert. You were forcefully promoted by the Supreme Will. Even the will of the Yellow River is not my match. Where did a newbie like you get the guts to fight me to the death? Hey, hey. When you heard that I killed the will of Yellow River, you became so crazy. Could it be that the will of Yellow River is your old flame? Tisk, tisk. How unfortunate. But don't worry. I'll send you to her in a minute. You two will be together again. And when you die, the netherworld will fall with you. By then, the Yellow River and the netherworld will become the territory of the illusionist clan, and the supreme great cosmos without the Yellow River and the netherworld will fall into endless chaos. Let's see how the supreme will fight against the illusionist clan then. Sooner or later, this universe is ours. The Death Whisperer laughed wildly. You deserve to die. The reincarnation will gritted its teeth and said angrily. Then, he suddenly thrust out the holy spear in his hand. Destruction of Samsara. Under the spear, the 6 paths of reincarnation collapsed. Its power was world-shaking. This was also the strongest Supreme Will Realm skill that the reincarnation will had grasped. With his full strength, coupled with the 9 Nether Reincarnation Sacred Spear, which was already an upper-level Will Holy Artifact, he could easily kill even an high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. However, the Death Whisperer was not an ordinary high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. In the face of this earth-shattering spear, he grinned. Then, he suddenly waved the black cloak on him and faced the incoming spear. Something happened that made Zhou Fight and the Reincarnation Will's pupils constrict. The Reincarnation Will's all-out spear actually charged into the black cloak and disappeared. After the black cloak swallowed the spear, even though it swelled up in an instant and looked like it was about to explode, after a while, the bulging black cloak gradually calmed down, as if it had completely digested the power released by the holy spear. The second Will Holy Artifact. And it should be a defensive superior Will Holy Artifact. Zhou Fight's expression was solemn. In front of this defensive superior Will Holy Artifact, the attack of the Reincarnation Will seemed so powerless. If the Reincarnation Will did not have any other offensive means, then his chances of winning would be very slim. At this moment, the Reincarnation Will seemed to have woken up and realized that the current situation seemed to be very bad for him. The mysterious black cloak was too much for him. He turned around and fled into the distance. You want to leave? The Death Whisperer laughed loudly. Then, it did not chase after him. Instead, its eyes turned cold. He muttered softly, but his voice seemed to resound in the ears of the Reincarnation Will. Death has opened its door to you. Death to those who came to die. As his voice disappeared, an open door of death seemed to appear in front of the Reincarnation Will. Inside the door of death, he seemed to see the figure of the Yellow River's will. Yellow River! He muttered. Divine blood flowed out of his divine aperture. His aura was constantly weakening as he approached death. He was clearly not far from death. The Death Whisperer sneered. In his eyes, the Reincarnation Will would definitely die if it was hit by his conceptual god power. He did not even bother to look at him. He turned around and looked at Zhou Fight. A strange look flashed in his eyes as he muttered to himself. You always turn misfortunes into blessings, boy. In that case, I'll say no more. Death to those who came to die. Death has opened the door to you. He pointed his staff at Zhou Fight from afar and activated the conceptual god ability. Zhou Fight was shocked. In the next second, a chill suddenly spread throughout his entire body. At that moment, a transparent light circulated on the surface of the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal in his first treasure vault. The strange feeling on Zhou Fight's body disappeared. On the other hand, the Death Whisperer's eyes widened as if it had seen something extremely terrifying. Its divine body trembled violently. This is... Before he could finish his sentence, his body suddenly stiffened as he died. Death Whisperer, fallen. Zhou Fight. What is going on? Zhou Fight was dumbfounded. All the spectating friends and foes were dumbfounded. Chapter 1743. The beginning of the counterattack. 1. Zhou Fight was at a loss. That Death Whisperer should be a Supreme Will Realm expert, right? Moreover, as the Supreme Commander of the Yellow River region's illusionary race, he should be a top Supreme Will Realm expert, right? Yet, he had died just like that? Without any warning? What happened? Zhou Fight fell into deep thought. In the end, his gaze fell on the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal in the number 1 treasure vault that was emitting faint transparent waves. This thing is activated. Could it have killed the Death Whisperer? Zhou Fight felt that there was only one possibility. A look of shock flashed across his eyes. Unbelievable. What the hell is this thing? Why is killing a top Supreme Will Realm expert like killing a chicken? There was no time to think. He flew to the reincarnation will first. However, his heart sank because the reincarnation will had actually died. It's not without reason that this Death Whisperer would directly ignore Brother Soul Heaven and deal with me. Zhou Fight thought with a heavy heart. He rejoiced again. Fortunately, he had the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal, otherwise, he really didn't know how to deal with such a strange method. He had not specially defended against such conceptual god methods with the Supreme Will Realm methods he had up until now. I'm so lucky. Previously, I was still thinking of using the Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Slate to help Brother Soul Heaven. It still seems a little naive. But when my Supreme Sacred Body advances to the Supreme Will Realm, even if it's at the Quasi-Supreme Will Realm, I should not be too afraid of such strange conceptual god methods. Zhou Fight thought. The Supreme Sacred Body was an eternal immortal realm inheritance after all. Even though the conceptual god power of the illusionist clan was strange, it was not to the extent of ignoring the inheritance of the eternal immortal realm. Then, he first put away the corpse of the Death Whisperer. There were at least 2 will holy artifacts and other unknown treasures on the corpse of this upper-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Naturally, they could not be casually placed here. Then, he looked at the reincarnation will and took a deep breath. The Supreme Will is not here yet. It's a good time to try my new trick. He held the Yellow River Emperor Sword with both hands and slashed at the head of the reincarnation will. Puff! The Yellow River Emperor Sword stabbed straight into the head of the reincarnation will. However, miraculously, no divine blood flowed out of the reincarnation will's head. There was not even a wound. It was as if the Yellow River Emperor Sword had fused into the head of the reincarnation will and not stabbed in. When Zhou Fight saw this, he activated the power of the Yellow River Emperor Sword with the power of his will. On the other side of the Yellow River, to save lives and ward off calamities. Life and death are inconsequential, the soul returns. Zhou Fight instantly felt his willpower being sucked into the Yellow River Emperor Sword accompanied by the sound of chanting. In the blink of an eye, he felt that his Grade 3 Supreme God Realm willpower was about to be exhausted. Zhou Fight's expression changed. He immediately activated the king to infinitely approach the Supreme Will Realm. After obtaining the power provided by the king, he immediately felt the pressure greatly decrease. Then, he carefully sensed the changes in the Yellow River Emperor Sword. He sensed it in no time. In his perception, he seemed to be able to see the Yellow River Emperor Sword emitting a mysterious power. This mysterious power extended to an extremely distant and unknown place, as if it was guiding something to the Yellow River Emperor Sword. No, to be precise, it was flying towards the corpse of the reincarnation will. This is the power of Yellow River. Zhou Fight had an inexplicable realization. A transparent will was drawn over by the power of the Yellow River and fused into the body of the reincarnation will. It is the reincarnation will. Zhou Fight even saw the stunned expression on the reincarnation will's face when it saw him stab the Yellow River Emperor Sword into his head. Zhou Fight pulled out the Yellow River Emperor Sword after seeing that the reincarnation will had completely fused into it. He could not help but click his tongue as he felt the nearly depleted power of will in his body. Good God! He had relied on his king to borrow the strength of all the subjects under him. He had almost exhausted all the power of his will to barely use the holy artifact technique, Yellow River Paramita, so that the reincarnation will could be revived. It was indeed very difficult to revive a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Right at that moment, he looked at the reincarnation will. At this moment, the reincarnation will had already opened his eyes. He had just revived when he suddenly stood up and observed his surroundings. Zhou Fite knew what the other party was doing and said directly, "The Death Whisperer is already dead." Dead. The reincarnation will was stunned. Zhou Fite nodded and waved his right hand. The corpse of the Death Whisperer appeared in front of them. Yellow Rivers will looked at the corpse in front of him in a daze. The illusionist clan, which had the power of a powerful conceptual god, had fallen just like that? How did he die? The reincarnation will could not help but ask. I don't know. Zhou Fite shook his head and said. The illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal was too mysterious. He didn't want to reveal it to others for the time being. The reincarnation will fell into deep thought. Then, an idea suddenly popped up in his mind. Could the Supreme Will have made a move? This is the only possibility. It is the most likely answer. Only the Supreme Will Realm expert had the strength to instantly kill such a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos. Chapter 1744. The beginning of the counterattack. 2. He stopped thinking about it at this time. Then, he looked at the Yellow River Emperor sword in Zhou Fite's hand. When Zhou Fite saw this, he immediately handed over the Yellow River Emperor sword. The reincarnation will took it and looked at it for a long time. He sighed and handed the Yellow River Emperor sword back to Zhou Fite. Brother, congratulations on obtaining the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. He recovered his expression and smiled. Then, he said solemnly, you saved my life again. He was indirectly resurrected because of Zhou Zhou. He had been revived by Zhou Fite using the Yellow River Emperor sword technique again. He didn't even know how to repay the two great favors that had saved his life. In the future, I'll be at your disposal. He thought for a moment and said directly. The reincarnation will thought that perhaps only his loyalty could barely be of some value to be able to repay the favor of saving his life twice. Brother, you're being too polite. Zhou Fite shook his head. I didn't save my elder brother to get anything in return. It's just that you're my elder brother and treat me extremely well. If my brother repays me with this, won't my behavior change? The reincarnation will was speechless. It seemed that he had indeed not thought it through. However, he soon smiled indifferently. That's true. Then if you have any trouble in the future, feel free to look for me. Even if I have to risk my life, I will help you achieve your wish. Zhou Fite. He shook his head helplessly. Brother, you'd better cherish this life in the future. Otherwise, if you accidentally die in the future, wouldn't you not be able to see the will of the Yellow River, Your Excellency? The reincarnation will's body trembled when he heard this. He hurriedly grabbed Zhou Fite's sleeve and asked, Brother, what did you say? Can I still see the Yellow River in the future? It's just a thought. Zhou Fite said honestly, if one day I master the method to revive Your Excellency, the will of Yellow River, I will definitely revive Your Excellency and let you get what you want. If I don't, I'll continue cultivating until I reach the eternal immortal realm. I don't believe that even an eternal realm expert can't revive Your Excellency Yellow River's will. The reincarnation will fell silent. Then, he heaved a long sigh. After a long while, he patted Zhou Fite's shoulder and exhaled. Brother, I believe you. If it were any other supreme god who said this, he would definitely not believe a word of it. He might even give the other party 2 slaps to let him know what it meant to be high and mighty. However, this was said by his younger brother. Even though it sounded very illusory, he still had a glimmer of hope. His younger brother had already cultivated to the grade 3 Supreme God realm in less than a year and had combat strength comparable to a low-level Supreme Will realm expert after all. This cultivation speed was 1 in a million. Perhaps his younger brother might really advance to the Supreme Will realm in the future? Zhou Fite smiled and did not explain further. For this kind of thing, it was best to prove it with real results. Then, he curiously asked. Brother, how did you get together with him, the Death Whisperer? The reincarnation will explained. I promised you that I would protect you when you were fighting for the inheritance of the Yellow River's will. Therefore, when you entered the inheritance of the Yellow River's will, I had been guarding nearby. In the end, before I could wait for you to come out, I unexpectedly felt the aura of the Death Whisperer. I was worried that his arrival would affect you, so I went to intercept him halfway. Then I realized that this guy wasn't just passing by. He seemed to be coming for you. How can I tolerate this? I directly fought with him. Zhou Fite. He felt warm in his heart. As expected of his big brother. If there was anything, he would really do it. As for why the other party was looking for him, Zhou Fai guessed that it might be because he had killed the demon fetus and Wu Shang. The news that these two fell in the illusionist clan world at the same time must have been known by them. That was why this death whisperer at the Supreme Will Realm came to him without caring about his identity and strength. It was even possible that the other party had already guessed that he had the fragment of the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. However, Zhou Fai did not mind. As long as he was in the ultimate void cosmos, under the eyes of the Supreme Will, his safety would definitely not be a problem. Besides, he now had the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal that could be used. It's not always who you should be afraid of. However, the illusionist clan was going to experience a huge earthquake. A top Supreme Will Realm expert had died after all. Experts of this level died in the illusionist clan's world because of him. It would definitely cause a small earthquake in their world. They would definitely think of ways to investigate the reason. And I'm sure there's more to be done to fix this, however that is a matter for the future. Zhou Fai was protected by the Supreme Will, so he was not very worried. He turned around and said, "Brother, now that this Death Whisperer has died, will the Yellow River Realm return to our hands soon? The reincarnation will also reacted." "That's right. Now that the Death Whisperer, the highest authority of the illusionist clan in the Yellow River region, had fallen, wouldn't it be the best time to attack?" However, he was not very optimistic about Zhou Fai's thoughts. He shook his head and said, "Now is indeed the best time to attack, but it's not that simple to take back the Yellow River region. First of all, the illusionist clan attaches great importance to the Yellow River realm, their first territory. Therefore, there are at least 5 Supreme Will Realm experts in his base. The Death Whisperer is just one of them. Even if we kill him now, there will be other Supreme Will Realm experts who will take over the responsibility of the Death Whisperer. Under such circumstances, although the illusionist clan in the entire Yellow River region is weaker, it's not easy to take them down. Also, the news of the Death Whisperer's death has probably spread. When the illusionist clan finds out, they will definitely send more troops to the Yellow River region. In the coming war, it may not be easy to turn the tables." Zhou Fai frowned when he heard this. He saw reincarnation will say, "However, this is indeed the best time to attack the illusionary race. Even if we can't take back the Yellow River, we can at least take back a portion of the territory." "Brother, I don't want to waste your time talking to me." After saying that, the reincarnation will actually disappeared on the spot. Zhou Fai. Big brother is really swift and decisive. He shook his head helplessly. Right at that moment, he suddenly sensed something and turned around. He saw a figure emitting pure white light standing behind him, smiling warmly at him. It was the Supreme Will. "Greetings, Lord Supreme Will." Zhou Fai hurriedly said respectfully. "I saw everything just now. Including you seizing the inheritance of the Yellow River's will and killing a top Supreme Will Realm expert like the Death Whisperer." The Supreme Will smiled and said, "You have done what God King Heaven Punishment and Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could not. It's just luck." Zhou Fai said awkwardly. Without the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal, how could he have killed that guy? The Supreme Will smiled and did not say anything else. "Oh, Lord Supreme Will." Zhou Fai was also puzzled. It was a little inconvenient to explain this doubt to the Reincarnation Will, but it could be explained to the Supreme Will who knew his background. He took out the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal and asked curiously, "Supreme Will, this treasure can actually kill a high-level Supreme Will Realm illusionist clan. What exactly is it?" The Supreme Will looked at the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal in Zhou Fai's hand for a long time before saying, "This is undoubtedly a will-holy artifact. Still, it's just a will-holy artifact to us. However, it seems to have a special effect on the illusionist clan. Its attack effect is no different from an immortal weapon used by an eternal realm expert in front of the illusionist clan." Immortal weapon? Zhou Fai was shocked. Chapter 1745. Supreme Emblem. 1. Zhou Fai looked at the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal in his hand in a daze. He had never dreamed that this thing was actually related to an immortal artifact. That was a supreme weapon that only eternal realm experts could use. Such a thing is actually in my hands now? Zhou Fai felt like he was in a dream. However, the Supreme Will's words woke him up. He understood that while this thing was comparable to an immortal artifact, it was only because his effect on the illusionist clan was comparable to an immortal artifact. Zhou Fai did not even know what it could do facing the other races. Zhou Fai summarized in his heart. Currently, its second use was that it was extremely lethal to the illusionist clan other than being able to provide him with an eternal immortal realm inheritance. There were no other effects for the time being apart from these two effects. The corners of Zhou Fai's mouth twitched. Thinking about it this way, the effect of this pseudo-immortal artifact was really a little indescribable. This thing could only shine when he officially faced the illusionist clan in the future. Here you go. Right at that moment, the Supreme Will extended his right hand and saw a pure white badge with closed eyes appear in his hand. The badge floated up and flew in front of Zhou Fai. Zhou Fai looked at the badge in front of Ilim. What's this? Zhou Fai looked at the Supreme Will. It's a gadget I created at random. Call it the Supreme Emblem. It contains a bit of my power. When you encounter danger, use the power of your will to activate it. This trace of power will transform into an incarnation of my power and protect you for a period of time. And I'll feel it trigger, and I'll fly right over to save you. The Supreme Will said. Zhou Fai's eyes widened slightly. He looked at the badge with a burning gaze. This was actually a badge that contained a trace of the Supreme Will's power. The Supreme Will was an existence that few could match in terms of willpower. Even an ordinary strong-willed person would find it difficult to deal with a trace of his strength, right? Thank you for the reward, Lord Supreme Will. Zhou Fai immediately held the badge in his hand, feeling safe. The Supreme Will nodded slightly. This was also some self-protection measures that he was given. Originally, he didn't want to give the other party such a means of self-protection at this time. However, his successor was improving his strength and attracting enemies too quickly. There were even high-level Supreme Will Realm experts who were starting to attack him. He didn't dare imagine what level of powerhouses would attack him in the future. Could it be an expert at the willpower level? At the thought of this, the Supreme Will could not help but chuckle. Oh, Lord Supreme Will! At this moment, Zhou Fai took out the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal and asked, what should I do with this treasure in the future? This was a willpower holy artifact comparable to an immortal artifact. Zhou Fai felt that it was hot to hold. As a cowardly contestant, he would have long wanted to throw it away if it weren't for the fact that the effects of this will holy artifact were really awesome and he couldn't bear to give it up. This was a hot potato after all, since it could make a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert attack him. He did not dare to think about what kind of enemies he could attract in the future. Zhou Fai and Zhou Zhou both actually hated treasures that could bring them trouble. This was because this was a serious violation of their principles. Hearing that, the Supreme Will could not help but smile again. At least you're an expert with the combat strength of the Supreme Will Realm now. Why are you still so scared? The Supreme Will reminded. Zhou Fai smiled bitterly and said. I do have some strength now, but I'm not invincible, am I? He naturally wouldn't be afraid if he was already invincible. The key was that he was not invincible yet. The Supreme Will shook his head. Just take it. You can protect this treasure with the Supreme Emblem I gave you. Zhou Fai looked at the Supreme Emblem beside him and heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded and put away the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal in relief. He could be at ease and keep it since the Supreme Will had said so. It was a willpower holy artifact comparable to an immortal artifact after all. In addition, it contained an unknown eternal immortal realm inheritance. Of course, Zhou Fai could not bear to throw away such a treasure. After asking about the legendary Tear Sacred Seal, Zhou Fai asked, Supreme Will, what are your plans now that the commander of the illusionist clan in the Yellow River realm has died? Follow on with an attack, of course. The Supreme Will smiled faintly and said, the reincarnation will is right. Even though we can't take back the Yellow River region in a short period of time, we can at least take back a portion of our territory. After saying that, he looked at Zhou Fai. You come too. It's a good opportunity to accumulate combat experience with the illusionary race. Sooner or later, you'll go to the Dusk battlefield and officially fight the illusionist clan. Moreover, the Yellow River realm is now the territory of you, the successor of the will of the Yellow River. You also need to contribute to this war. Zhou Fai hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. The Supreme Will was right. He did have to contribute to his territory. And this was indeed a good opportunity to accumulate combat experience. In addition, he also wanted to test the power of this illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. However, killing 3 illusionist clan members with the illusionary legendary Tear Sacred Seal did not feel satisfying. The Supreme Will smiled seeing that Zhou Fai had agreed. Chapter 1746 Supreme Emblem 2. Then you can come tomorrow. Okay. Zhou Fight took his leave after chatting with the Supreme Will for a while. He had to go back and prepare the army and supplies to prepare for the army to come to the Yellow River region to fight tomorrow. The Supreme Will looked at the place where Zhou Fight had left and sighed. His growth path is different from God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. Right at that moment, a cold voice sounded beside him. It continued, God King Heaven Punishment is an invincible king's path. And the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord is the ultimate hidden dragon path. And this little fellow, the common people's regal. It has the shadow of the invincible path of the God King Heaven Punishment and the shadow of the hidden dragon path of the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. It's clearly a path of a king with two completely opposite styles, but now, it's so complementary and fused with the common people's regal. Amazing. Unbelievable. He sighed. He had an extremely high valuation of Zhou Fight. That is because he rose too quickly. The Supreme Will said indifferently, so fast that he has already surpassed many of his enemies before they could react. So fast that he made sure that he isn't someone ordinary enemies can provoke even if he is in a dormant period. And then he came to this day. The Supreme Will sighed in his heart. The path of his rising can't be replicated. Not even the God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. I'm so envious that you have 3 successors like this. The voice said. The Supreme Will chuckled softly in his heart. Then, the voice said, why don't you take away his legendary Tear Sage seal? The effect that thing can play in Eli's hands is far inferior to the effect that it can play in your hands. With that holy seal, you can even completely solve the problem of the illusionist clan in a short period of time and drive them back to their hometown. The Supreme Will was silent for a while before saying, the Supreme Treasure has a spirit. Since the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal chose the common people's regal and not me, who is stronger, it proves that the common people's regal is fated with that treasure. I would only get a disobedient treasure even if I could snatch it by force. In that case, why don't we leave it to the common people's regal? Furthermore, it's not my goal to send the illusionist clan back to them. Or you mean? The voice seemed to have thought of something and suddenly raised its voice. The Supreme Will did not say anything. He only smiled and said to himself, let's see how far this little fellow can go in the future. Don't let me down, my dear successor. On the other side, Zhou Fight suddenly slapped his head just as he was about to leave. I forgot to hand the letter of Yellow River's will to Big Brother and Uncle Tuesday. There's also Tianyang Wazhu. I forgot about him. Give Uncle Tu's letter to him first. It's a letter from Brother Soul Heaven. We'll talk about it when we meet tomorrow. Then I'll go see Tianyang Wazhu. Zhou Fight also knew that the reincarnation will should be busy deploying troops. It would be a little troublesome to look for him at this time, so he did not look for him. Instead, he found Uncle Tu first and handed the letter from the reincarnation will to him. Uncle Tu burst into tears on the spot after reading the letter from the reincarnation will. After thanking Zhou Fight, he left. Then, Zhou Fight went straight to Tianyang Wazhu. When he arrived at the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will, he discovered that the door to the land of inheritance was tightly closed. Zhou Fight was stunned. He had a bad feeling about this. No way. He muttered in his heart. Then, he had an idea. The scaled door of the Yellow River suddenly opened. Then, a series of figures flew out of the land of inheritance as if they were escaping. The leaders were Tianyang Wazhu and his Prime Minister Wu. At this moment, the two deities' expressions were filled with shock and joy, as if they had just escaped from a great calamity. The supreme gods under them had tears in their eyes. They were so excited that their bodies were trembling. At this moment, they finally saw Zhou Fight and the 20 supreme gods under him not far away. They immediately flew over as if they had seen their savior. Tianyang Wazhu said with grief and indignation as soon as he flew over, Your Highness common people's regal, I almost thought that I would never see you again in my life. Then, Tianyang Wazhu immediately explained the cause and effect. Zhou Fight could not help but feel a little awkward after hearing that. It was pretty much what he had expected. It turned out that before he left, he was afraid that Tianyang Wazhu and the other god spirits would be implicated and injured by the battle between Supreme Will Realm experts, so he reminded they to go to the land of inheritance to avoid the aftermath of the battle. Unexpectedly, the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will was safe, but not long after they entered, the door to the land of inheritance of the Yellow River's will closed. Good God! This was an inheritance door specially established by a Supreme Will Realm expert. Ordinary high-level Supreme Will Realm experts could not break through this door, let alone juniors like Tianyang Huazu who were not even at the Supreme Will Realm. Hence, when they realized that they were completely trapped here, they immediately despaired. They couldn't even contact Regal Great Solar. If not for Zhou Fight's return, they would probably have been trapped here for a long time before being discovered. It was my negligence that caused you to suffer such an undeserved disaster. I'll buy you all drinks another day. Zhou Fight openly admitted his mistake. Seeing Zhou Fight's sincere apology, coupled with his earth-shatteringly handsome face, Tianyang Huazu and the other god spirits really couldn't get angry. In the blink of an eye, their anger dissipated. It doesn't matter. We weren't trapped in there for long. Your Highness, common people's regal, you're being too serious. Tianyang Huazu spoke first. Zhou Fight smiled and nodded. Oh, yeah. Tianyang Huazu suddenly thought of something and carefully looked around. Is the battle between the top powerhouses over? It's over. Zhou Fight nodded. Who's fighting? Who's winning? Tianyang Huazu asked curiously. It was very likely that the battle just now was between two Supreme Will Realm experts. Battles of this level were not uncommon. He was extremely curious. The two sides are our Reincarnation Will and the Death Whisperer, the supreme commander of the Illusionist clan in the Yellow River region. As for who won, we won, of course. The Death Whisperer has completely fallen. Zhou Fight said with a faint smile. Tianyang Huazu was stunned for a moment, then immediately became pleasantly surprised. Lord Reincarnation Will has clearly just advanced not long ago, but he can actually kill an old top Supreme Will Realm expert. My goodness, the Supreme Will's eyes are still so sharp when it comes to choosing subordinates. Zhou Fight pondered for a second before saying, the one who killed the Death Whisperer was not the Reincarnation Will. Who's that? Tianyang Huazu immediately asked curiously. Could it be that another Supreme Will Realm expert had interfered? It's me. Zhou Fight said straightforwardly. Since Isle had decided to cooperate with Tianyang Huazu, it was definitely a good thing to show his strength appropriately. Therefore, Zhou Fight was not stingy with showing his strength at this moment, so he told him about this matter. Unexpectedly, after he finished speaking, the expressions of Tianyang Huazu and the other god spirits immediately turned strange. He didn't believe him. However, then again, it made sense. Who would dare to think that a grade 3 Supreme God Realm could kill a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert? This was like a fantasy story. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your father. Your father should know about this. After saying that, Zhou Fight did not explain further. And his affirmative and indifferent expression made Tianyang Huazu wonder. Looking at his composed appearance, could it be that the Death Whisperer was really killed by him? However, how could a grade 3 Supreme God Realm possibly do this? Not to mention the common people's regal. Even God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could not do it, right? At that moment, his personal terminal suddenly received a message. He looked over and his divine body trembled. When he looked at Zhou Fight again, he felt that the big brother in front of him could be described as a tall mountain by him. It turned out that the Death Whisperer was really killed by the common people's regal as father had said. Chapter 1747. Cooperation achieved. 1. Tianyang Huazu looked at Zhou Fight in shock. He went numb. How did this big brother do it? A grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert had forcefully killed a top Supreme Will Realm expert? Wasn't this too exaggerated? No Supreme God had ever had such a battle record since ancient times. Even the so-called most genius God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could not kill a Supreme Will Realm expert at this level. The difference between a Supreme Will Realm expert and a Supreme God was almost equivalent to the difference between a God spirit and an ordinary person. Zhou Fight's achievements were as exaggerated as an ordinary person personally killing a God spirit. He was silent for a long time, unable to come back to his senses. It was not until Prime Minister Wu pulled Tianyang Huazu back that he came back to his senses. Common people's regal. He smiled bitterly. I'm convinced. I'm really convinced. Your Highness is really the #1 Supreme God in history. Zhou Fight smiled slightly, accepting his praise. Even though he had used the power of a supreme treasure to kill a top Supreme Will Realm expert with the body of a Supreme God, it was not like this treasure did not belong to him. It was definitely a part of his strength. Therefore, he could also be considered a top Supreme Will Realm expert that he had killed. He believed that he could still accept Tianyang Huazu's praise. After that, Zhou Fai chatted with Tianyang Wazu for a while before talking about the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill. Did His Highness Tianyang take the 9 saint heaven and earth pill previously? Yes, he did. Tianyang Wazu nodded and said, this is a treasure that father once rewarded me with. It can be considered a top-notch divine medicine in terms of life-saving recovery. At this point, he suddenly slapped his head. Look at my brain. I once said that if your highness deals with that Wu Shang, I'll give your highness a 9 saint heaven and earth pill. Your highness left in a hurry so I forgot to give it to you. I'll give it to your highness now. After saying that, he solemnly took out a bottle of pills from his world rings and handed it to Zhou Fai. Your highness, this 9 saint heaven and earth pill is very precious. Even our Sun Divine Court doesn't have much storage. Your highness, you have to make good use of it. You might be able to save yourself a few times in the future. Zhou Fai took it and looked at a medicinal pill that emitted a dark yellow fog. He nodded. He naturally knew how precious the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have specially looked for Tianyang Wazu to trade. I want to make a deal with your highness Tianyang. Zhou Fai suddenly said. Tianyang Wazu was stunned. Deal, with me? Why were they suddenly talking about a deal? Your highness, please speak. Tianyang Wazu said politely. He was also very curious about the deal that Zhou Fai had mentioned. I have a large batch of materials to make the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill. However, I only know the ingredients, not the pill formula or the alchemist. So I want to use His Highness Tianyang to make these raw materials into finished pills. Is His Highness Tianyang interested in this deal? Zhou Fai asked with a faint smile. Tianyang Wazu hesitated for a second. He did not expect it to be about the transaction of the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill. Even though this kind of pill was said to be a supreme god level pill, in terms of cost and refining method, it was almost no different from a pill at the supreme will realm. Therefore, even he was not qualified to come into contact with such matters. Of course, just because he was not qualified to interact with them did not mean that he could not speak to the higher-ups. May I ask your highness how many 9 saint heaven and earth pills you have in your hands? He asked cautiously. I want to know. I should be able to make 180. Zhou Fai extended his right hand and saw a world ring appear in his hand. He threw it to Tianyang Wazu. The ingredients are all here. Take a look for yourself. Tianyang Wazu. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. He recalled what Zhou Fai had said. Materials for 189 sacred heaven and earth pills. Such a foundation was almost comparable to the foundation of their Sun Divine Court. Even their Sun Divine Court only had so many materials. They had yet to refine all these materials into the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill just in case. Instead, they had only refined a portion. Even the richest lord faction in the myriad worlds, the Sun Divine Court, only dared to use these materials so stingily. How could the common people's regal, the third reserve army of the newly risen Supreme Lord, have so many refining materials? Tianyang Wazu's first thought was disbelief. He still didn't believe that he had so many materials even if he admired Tianyang Wazu now. However, he did not say it immediately, thinking about how the other party had just killed a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert, out of respect for the experts. Instead, he first took the world rings and entered with the power of his will, preparing to check. However, he was stunned just by looking at it. Why are there so many refining materials? He cried out. Not only did the world ring have enough materials to refine 189 saint heaven and earth pills, it also far exceeded them. According to this number, there was no problem refining nearly 209 sacred heaven and earth pills. This was nearly 200 materials for the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill. It had already exceeded the foundation of their Sun Divine Court in this aspect. You call this 180 pieces? At this moment, Zhou Fai said. If you're willing to represent the Sun Divine Court to cooperate with this emperor, we can sign a supreme contract. Then, you can keep 10% of the 9 saint heaven and earth pills you refine. You can leave the remaining 90% to me. Chapter 1748. Cooperation achieved. 2. When Tianyang Wazu heard this, he was naturally very willing. The biggest reason for the scarcity of the 9 sacred heaven and earth pills was that his raw materials were too rare. As for his prescription and the alchemist who refined it, it was actually not difficult to find them in the number 1 faction in the myriad worlds, the Sun Divine Court. However, he still probed. Your Highness, common people's regal, is 90% of the pills too much? Shall we split it 30-70? Upon hearing this, Zhou Fight glanced at him and said, let's call it quits. After saying that, he directly took the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill ingredients from Tianyang Wazu's hand and turned to leave. Tianyang Wazu was stunned when he saw this scene. This. Why did it end so decisively? Then, he panicked. Even if they could not cooperate, they must not destroy the relationship that they had just repaired. As for cooperation, he naturally wanted to do it. That was a business worth nearly 209 sacred heaven and earth pills. Not to mention that he wanted to cooperate. Even if Regal Great Solar came personally, he would probably want to cooperate. They were too useful to the juniors of Supreme Will Realm experts after all, even though the 9 sacred heaven and earth pill were useless to Supreme Will Realm experts like Regal Great Solar. Which family did not have many juniors who needed to be taken care of? This 9 sacred heaven and earth pill was the best treasure to take care of the lives of the juniors. The Regal Great Solar could win over a large number of people just by rewarding these 9 sacred heaven and earth pills to his subordinates. There was no time to think. Tianyang Wazu immediately ran in front of Zhou Fight and said apologetically and fearfully, Your Highness, common people's Regal, can you give me as much as you want? Previously, I was too greedy and said something wrong. Your Highness, common people's Regal, please don't take it to heart. When Zhou Fight saw his expression, he raised his eyebrows slightly. This guy was really willing to sacrifice his subordinates just to build a relationship with him. He is Regal Great Solar's direct descendant after all. There was no need for him to be like this, right? Could it be that he had just learned that he had killed an high-level Supreme Will Realm expert, so he was so servile? Zhou Fight thought about it and realized that this was the only possibility. That's true. If he had heard of such a thing, he would have been shocked. Not to mention an extraordinary Tier 1. These thoughts in his mind only lasted for a moment. Zhou Fight's expression was calm as he said indifferently, Your Highness Tianyang, even though your son Divine Court has the pill formula and alchemist for the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill, your son Divine Court is not the only one with the pill formula and alchemist. In comparison, the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill ingredients in this Emperor's hands are the ones that are used in the myriad worlds. Since you're so insincere, I can go and ask other alchemists who have the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill to help me. I'm sure the alchemists in the Supreme Will Realm in the myriad worlds will still be willing to give me, the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord, face. Hearing this, Tianyang Wazu revealed a bitter expression. He cupped his fists and said, I was blinded by benefits just now. I apologize to the common people's Regal. As far as cooperation is concerned, I'll say the same thing again. Your Highness, how do you want to divide it? Even if it's a 100% 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill, our son Divine Court is very willing to accept this deal. Compared to a mere 10 or 20 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pills, we value our friendship with the common people's Regal more. Only then did Zhou Fight feel satisfied. However, he naturally wouldn't really ask for 100% of the 9 Saints Heaven and Earth pills. One could not be too greedy after all. Moreover, they had to give Regal Great Solar, the strongest Supreme Will Realm expert, face. Since His Highness Tianyang has said so, let's do as we said before. I'll take 90% of the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pills and give the rest to you. Zhou Fight said. Tianyang Wazu heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Thank you for your magnanimity, Your Highness common people's Regal. Let's go according to this ratio. Zhou Fight nodded. Then, he threw the world ring he had just taken back to Tianyang Wazu. Tianyang Wazu hurriedly took it and looked at the ring with shining eyes. Even though they could only take 10% of the 9 sacred heaven and earth pills, they could at least get more than 15. This was already a very large number. In addition, through this matter, he had formed a friendship with the common people's Regal, who could defeat a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. He had a feeling. When he returned, his father would definitely praise him. Tianyang Wazu could no longer suppress the anxiety in his heart and said to Zhou Fight, Common people's Regal, I'll go back to the Sun Divine Court now and refine the 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill as soon as possible. 3 days. 3 days, tops. I'll send the refined 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill to your Highness. 3 days. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. The 9 Saint Heaven and Earth pill was a divine pill that was comparable to a Supreme Will Realm medicinal pill. Normally speaking, it would not be an exaggeration to refine such a medicinal pill for more than 10,000 years at once. How could he refine it in 3 days? Tianyang Huazhu explained. Your Highness Common People's Regal, our Sun Divine Court's time acceleration treasure can accelerate to a maximum of 1 day, 10,000 years. Even though I can't comprehend laws or cultivate in other aspects in this time accelerated treasure, it's not a problem to refine and forge some items. Zhou Fight was enlightened. Then, he could not help but feel envious. If only he had a treasure similar to this kind of time acceleration. That way, his blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's territorial development speed would definitely reach a higher level. In fact, this time acceleration array was somewhat similar to his reincarnation sacred palace. However, his reincarnation sacred palace could not be refined in the time world and brought out from it. However, its advantage was that it could cultivate in the time world. This was not something that Tianyang Huazhu's time acceleration treasure could compare to. In comparison, Zhou Fight preferred his reincarnation sacred palace. Cultivation realm was the most important after all. Zhou Fight and Tianyang Huazhu chatted for a while more before Tianyang Huazhu left in a hurry. After Zhou Fight was done with these matters, he immediately returned to Blazing Sun Divine Capital. He was going to gather an army and come to the Yellow River tomorrow. Together with the reincarnation will, he would expel all the illusionist clan here. The Supreme Will was right. Now that he had become the de facto ruler of the Yellow River region, he could not tolerate the existence of any enemies under his nose. How could he allow someone else to snore beside him? On the other side, in the Yellow River battlefield, a knight in a yellow gold tier armor was standing there, looking down at the battlefield. On the battlefield, the illusionist clan's army and God King Heaven Punishment's heavenly punishment army were fighting fiercely. The two sides exchanged blows, killing each other. It was a battle of life and death. However, the yellow gold tier knight looked very relaxed. The illusionist clan was invincible in the dusk battlefield after all. The dead illusionist clan only needed to recuperate for a period of time before they could return to the battlefield and continue to fight with God King Heaven Punishment's Heaven Punishment army. As for the soldiers of the Heaven Punishment army, every death meant one less. He could be resurrected, the price would be extremely high. It was not something that God King Heaven Punishment or even the Supreme Will could withstand. Therefore, he was extremely confident in the current war. Sooner or later, the God King Heaven Punishment's Heavenly Punishment army, as well as the Supreme Will and Supreme Army, will be defeated by my fearless king, Saket. When the time comes, this dusk battlefield will belong to me. Then, I can use the dusk battlefield as a springboard to attack the entire Supreme Great Cosmos and even the entire Ultimate Void Great Cosmos. The great dream of the illusionist clan will be realized by Saket. Saket's eyes burned with ambition. Chapter 1749. Supreme Unique Lord Talent. Supreme God Body. War Summary. 1. Just as the fearless king was looking forward to his own future. Report. A Supreme God-level illusionist clan quickly flew over from behind and came behind the fearless king. Your Excellency, the Supreme Lord has issued an urgent decree. The fearless king frowned and said. He felt strange. His dusk battlefield or the Yellow River region were both under the control of the illusionary race. How could there be an emergency decree at such a time? He did not ask further even though he was puzzled. Instead, he was prepared to hear what this Supreme God was going to say next. The Grand Supreme Elder was the true supreme existence of the illusionist clan. His status was even equivalent to the illusionary origin of the illusionary world. Even him, who was considered a top expert in the illusionist clan, had to obey his orders respectfully. The Grand Supreme Elder has decreed that the Death Whisperer died in the Death Canyon just now. The death of the Death Whisperer is very likely related to the common people's regal and the lost illusionary legendary tier sacred seal. He orders you to investigate the truth of the Death Whisperer's death as soon as possible. If you find that it's really related to the illusionary legendary tier sacred seal, you must bring it back to the illusionary world. If you can't bring it back, you must destroy it. Don't let it fall into the hands of the life form of the ultimate void universe and let it master the complete legendary tier sacred seal. This is the first priority now. Any other mission, including the ultimate plan to invade the ultimate void great cosmos, can be compromised for this. I hope that Your Excellency the Fearless King can collect all the fragments of the illusionary legendary tier sage seal as soon as possible. After completing the mission, you will be rewarded with a great merit. You will be rewarded with a will treasure or a chance to unlock destiny. When the Fearless King heard this decree, his first reaction was shock. The troublesome Death Whisperer was actually dead? For most of the illusionist clan, the conceptual god ability of the Death Whisperer was almost unsolvable and terrifying. However, he had also died at the hands of the common people's regal. Besides, it is the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. The fearless king had a solemn expression. If the common people's regal really had the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal, then nothing would be surprising. That was the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal after all. The illusionary legendary Tear Sacred Seal was known as the world-destroying holy artifact in their illusionist clan. It was naturally easy for common people's regal to kill the Death Whisperer with the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. Furthermore, the reward of the sun made him very tempted. The preciousness of a treasure with a will was needless to say for a supreme will realm expert like him. As for the opportunity to unlock the heavenly fate, it could tempt countless illusionist clan members. To put it simply, the unlocking of destiny was a chance for the illusionist clan to awaken a second or even more conceptual god ability. Who doesn't want to have more conceptual god abilities as a god of the conceptual god system? The fearless king was no exception. I accept the imperial decree. These thoughts only lasted for a moment. The fearless king immediately said respectfully after thinking about it. Then, he began to think again. The Yellow River region had already lost the strongest supreme will realm expert, the Death Whisperer. They had lost their strongest top combatant. As long as the generals of the Supreme Will were not stupid, they would definitely take this opportunity to send troops to attack the Yellow River region so that they could snatch it back. Fortunately, there were other Supreme Will realm experts stationed in the Yellow River region. Therefore, the fearless king did not have to worry about the Yellow River region being breached in the short term. Since it was the common people's regal who killed the Death Whisperer, if nothing goes wrong, it should be the common people's regal who obtained the inheritance of Yellow River's will. He is already the lord of the Yellow River of the Yellow Springs region. He definitely won't let us occupy his territory. In other words, if I send troops to deal with the other party now, it's very likely that I'll encounter this common people's regal. At that time, with my strength, I'm very likely to kill the common people's regal and obtain the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal from him. At the thought of this, the fearless king's eyes lit up. In that case, the Death Whisperer's death this time gave him the best chance to take back the legendary Tear Sage seal of illusionary. When would he make a move if he didn't make it now? At the thought of this, the fearless king made a decision on the spot. He would go to the Yellow River region personally and kill the common people's regal with his own hands to take the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal that might be in his hands. It would be the safest if he took action himself. He was a top-notch expert in the Twilight battlefield after all. His strength was completely incomparable to the Death Whisperers stationed in the Yellow River realm. However, the fearless king thought of the possible illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. His expression suddenly became cautious. That was a peerless holy artifact that could suppress an era. Even though he was strong, he could not be careless. He suddenly had the thought of finding helpers. Right. We need help. The fearless king thought. Then, he immediately contacted a few experts of the illusionist clan at the Supreme Will realm. After making arrangements for the Twilight battlefield, he immediately set off for the Yellow River region. At night, in the sky of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace of the Blazing Sun Divine Capital. In the Reincarnation Sacred Palace, Zhou Zhou was looking at the war report in front of him. Chapter 1750. Supreme Unique Lord Talent. Supreme God Body. War Summary. 2. The statistics were calculated of the joint efforts of the four battlefields: Supreme Continent Battlefield, Ultimate Void Great Cosmos Battlefield, Tianjun's Corpse Battlefield, Crimson Great Cosmos Battlefield. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had obtained a total of 5,000 capital units of various levels of mist cores, origin crystals, skill books, equipment, and basic materials today. 36 capital units, 3,871,192,828,371,784 green bronze tier Lord Talent crystal fragments. 6,123 units of Chaos Divine Treasure. 81,232,837 legendary tier and below Lord Talent spheres. A large number of Lord Talent crystal fragments of other levels. There were also 5 Guy Unit 8,327 capital units 9,278,918,240 million units of divine crystals from low tier to high tier deity level. 10,238,123,879,187 true God tier divine crystals. 6,293,898,722,736 Master God Tier Divine Crystals. 438,941,872 Grade 1 to Grade 3 Supreme God Divine Crystals. 50 capital units with 1,827,239,822,000,000 lesser gods to high tier deity level divine artifacts. 81,228,310,000 true god tier divine artifacts. 21,398,913 master god tier divine artifacts. 719,182 supreme god divine artifacts. There were about 60 capital units with a total of 1,928 trillion divine spark fragments, god tier medicinal herbs, god tier ingredients, god tier ores, god tier blueprints, and other treasures. 1,023,123,982,386 master god tier herbs, god tier ingredients, god tier ores, god tier blueprints, and other treasures. 6,122,371 supreme god level god tier herbs, god tier ingredients, god tier ores, god tier blueprints, and other treasures. In terms of insight defection, Zhou Zhou's clones had used the 2 insight defection skills of Land of Earth, a Minister of the King, and Son of Destiny today to instigate a total of 2 Guy Unit 1121 capital units soldiers, 12,332,981,328 low-tier deity-level god spirits, 10,023,881 mid-tier deity-level god spirits, 6,023,897 high-tier deity-level god spirits, 3,087,981,234 true god tiers, 341,923 supremacies, and 79 supreme wills. In addition, the Lords of the Star Alliance had also instigated 4,912 capital units soldiers, more than 18,212,970,000 god spirits, more than 14 million true god tiers, and 3,871 Lord gods. In the end, in terms of the advancement of god spirits, a total of 231,989,171,782 legendary tier advanced grade soldiers had been promoted to low tier deity level elementary grade god spirits. There were also 19,819,281 high tier deity level advanced grade god spirits who had advanced to true god tier elementary grade god spirits. Another 33,122 top-notch true gods of the human race and 89,811 top-notch true gods of the people of foreign races felt their master god tier bottleneck and applied to enter the reincarnation sacred palace to cultivate in seclusion in an attempt to break through to the master god tier realm. Moreover, there were 20 master god tier advanced grade god spirits who sensed the bottleneck in their advancement and were also preparing to enter the reincarnation sacred palace today to advance to a grade 1 supreme god. Zhou Zhou's original military strength was 44 Guy units 5,547 capital units 2,376,709,712,912,389 million soldiers, 8,331,636,889 god spirits, 22,612,317,037 true god tier, 351,612 master gods, 246 supreme gods, and 6 quasi-supreme will realms. The military strength under him had reached 1 Guy Unit 1010 capital units 731,283,1272,978 soldiers, 248,573,699,994 god spirits, 7,357,117,439 true gods, 82,997 master gods, and 53 supreme gods with the addition of these divine spirit experts who had instigated the insight defection and the 5 supreme gods and 15 master gods recruited from the chaotic mystic realm. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly after reading it. With the continuous development of the 4 battlefields, his daily war gains increased. The total number of god spirits under him had exceeded 1 trillion. There were also 16 quasi-supreme will realm experts. Not bad, not bad. Zhou Fight was very satisfied. Tomorrow, he would open up the 5th battlefield, which was the Yellow River Realm battlefield. At that time, his daily gains from the battle would be even greater. In addition to the above war summary, in terms of purchasing Chaos Divine treasures in the Chaos Sea, the management of the Chaos Sea today bought 220 units of Chaos Divine Treasures from the Divine Kingdom Lord factions that were collecting Chaos Divine Treasures in the Time Ruins. He originally had 2,890 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. Now, with these 220 units of Chaos Divine Treasures and the 3,588 units of Chaos Divine Treasures obtained from other battlefields, it added up to 6,698 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. The number of Chaos Divine Treasures is completely enough to upgrade the needs of the territory. There's even more than 13,000 units. Zhou Shizi and Zhou 15 have collected enough Ultimate Void Crystals in the Ultimate Void Cosmos today. Now, I only need to complete the requirements of 10 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms before I can upgrade my territory. Zhou Fight thought. He would definitely not be able to complete this requirement in a short period of time in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos. However, fortunately, according to the information sent by Zhou 16, he had already successfully headed to the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos and disguised his identity through the cube. He had already become the master of a beginner grade Master God tier kingdom in the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos. He had already successfully headed to the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos and disguised his identity through the cube. He had already become the master of a beginner grade Master God tier kingdom in the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos. It was just 10 beginner grade Master God tier kingdoms. It was very difficult to be satisfied in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos. However, in a place like the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos where even the willpower of lords existed, it was too easy to fulfill this requirement. Then, he entered the Reincarnation Sacred Palace again and began to cultivate. The next day, Zhou Zhou slowly opened his eyes. After he sensed the cultivation situation that night, he nodded in satisfaction. Now, he was already one step closer to the level of a Grade 4 Supreme God. His will had also reached the limit of the Will Divine Transformation Realm, and he was only a step away from breaking through to the Supreme Will Realm. The reason why he could cultivate so quickly was not only because of the divine artifact that he had previously grasped that aided his cultivation, but also because of the Yellow River Slate that he had just obtained yesterday. The Yellow River Water refined holy artifact ability of the Yellow River Slate greatly accelerated his efficiency in honing his willpower. This was how he had broken through to the limit of the Will Divine Transformation Realm in such a short period of time. I'm confident that I can break through to the Supreme Will Realm after cultivating for another 2 to 3 days. When the time comes, these will holy artifacts in my hands can be used as I wish without having to worry about not having enough willpower. Zhou Zhou thought. Then, he opened the Lord Talent interface and checked the newly upgraded Supreme Unique Lord Talent from last night. Lord Talent, Supreme God Body, Supreme. Unique. Supreme God Body. Specific Lord Talent Effect 1, you and your territory's subject constitution are both Supreme God Bodies. Your potential will increase by 3 major levels, and the highest level can reach the level of a Grade 4 Supreme God. Specific Lord Talent Effect 2, the lowest strength of you and the subjects under you is Legendary Tier Elementary Grade. Specific Lord Talent Effect 3, it is easier for you and your territorial subjects to comprehend the power of Extraordinary Tier and become Extraordinary Tier professionals. When you and your territorial subjects are at the Extraordinary Tier level, you can begin to comprehend the power of laws and lay the foundation of laws for you to advance to the God Spirit level in the future. Specific Lord Talent Effect 4, it's easier for you and the subjects under you to comprehend laws, create new skills, and even create law skills. Specific Lord Talent Effect 5, when you and the subjects under you advance to the God Spirit realm, your success rate will increase by 50%. When you advance to the True God tier, your success rate will increase by 20%. When you advance to the Master God tier, your success rate will increase by 10%. When you advance to the Supreme God realm, your success rate will increase by 3%. Zhou Zhou's eyes lit up after reading it. As expected of the Supreme Unique Lord Talent's Supreme God Body, just the upper limit of his potential had directly increased by 3 major levels, reaching the level of a Grade 4 Supreme God. In other words, you could become a peerless genius with the potential of a Grade 4 Supreme God as long as your potential was at the Legendary Tier Advanced Grade, with the help of the Supreme God Body. In the future, he would be able to become a Supreme God almost 100%. And what was the limit of the potential of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom subjects? It was a mid-tier deity level advanced grade. In other words, with the help of the Supreme God Body, all the subjects in their Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had the potential of a Grade 4 Supreme God. All of them were geniuses who had broken through the limit of their potential. A smile appeared on Zhou Fight's face. In terms of the potential of the subjects, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom subjects could be said to be undoubtedly the number one in the myriad worlds. Awesome! Zhou Zhou thought comfortably.